Adrian Vescari ruled Chicago's underworld with an iron fist, until the night he walked into his own execution. His wife, his best friend, both celebrating his death while his jet burned in the Atlantic. But he wasn't on it, and the quiet housemaid who'd served him coffee every morning, she's the one who saved him, by pressing a finger to his lips and whispering the words that would destroy his entire world. Don't move. They think you're already dead. Stay until the end to see how a ghost takes back his throne. Drop a like and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The rain came down like judgment. Adrian Vescari stood in the marble entryway of his Lakeshore Drive mansion, water streaming from his overcoat onto floors that cost more than most people made in a year. He shouldn't have been there. He should have been 30,000 feet over the Atlantic, sipping scotch in his private jet, reviewing contracts that would expand his reach into 3 new ports by morning. Instead, he was home 4 hours early because his gut had twisted wrong. He'd learned to trust that feeling. In 20 years of running Chicago's most profitable criminal enterprise, that instinct had kept him alive through ambushes, investigations, and betrayals that would have buried lesser men. Tonight, it had pulled him out of his penthouse office, through downtown traffic, and back to the house he'd left that afternoon without so much as a goodbye to his wife. The house was dark except for a soft glow from the study upstairs. Adrian shrugged off his coat, letting it fall where it landed. His security team was conspicuously absent, another wrong note in a symphony that had been playing discordant all week. Marcus, his head of security and closest friend for 15 years, had insisted on minimal staff tonight. Said it was better for operational security with the jet departure. Bullshit. Adrian's hand moved to the Glock holstered at his hip. His fingers touched cold metal, and some of the tension in his shoulders eased. He'd made his fortune reading rooms, reading people, reading the spaces between what they said and what they meant. Right now, his home felt like a trap waiting to spring. He moved through the foyer with practiced silence, decades of survival overriding the instinct to call out. The marble gave way to hardwood, then to the Persian runner that led toward the main staircase. Voices drifted from above, low, celebratory. Laughter. His wife's laughter. Adrian's jaw tightened. Vivian rarely laughed anymore. Their marriage had calcified into something transactional years ago. She played the society wife, he provided the lifestyle, and they orbited each other in careful, cold distance. Hearing genuine joy in her voice now felt like finding blood on fresh snow. Beautiful and wrong. He reached the base of the stairs just as a figure materialized from the shadows of the adjacent hallway. A hand clamped over his mouth. Adrian's training kicked in instantly. He grabbed the wrist, ready to break it, ready to put whoever this was through the nearest wall. But then he registered the softness of the hand, the smell of lemon cleaner, and a voice that whispered against his ear with desperate urgency. Don't move. Elena, his housemaid, the quiet woman who'd worked in his home for the past 8 months, practically invisible in her efficiency. He'd spoken maybe 20 words to her total. Now she was pressed against him in the dark, her other hand gripping his arm with surprising strength, her breath quick and shallow against his neck. They think you're dead, she whispered. If you make a sound, you will be. Above them, Vivian's voice rang out clearly. To the Atlantic. May it keep its secrets. Glass clinked. More laughter. Elena's grip tightened. Listen, she breathed. Just listen. Every instinct screamed at Adrian to move, to act, to take control. But something in her tone froze him. Terror, yes, but also certainty. She wasn't guessing. She knew. Marcus's voice joined Vivian's, warm and familiar and absolutely devastating. 5 years of planning, 5 goddamn years. And it worked exactly like you said it would, Viv. The fuel line, the autopilot override, beautiful. The man never saw it coming. He saw everything coming, Vivian replied. Her voice was different now, sharper. This wasn't the docile socialite who attended charity galas and complained about the quality of imported roses. This was someone else entirely. That's why we had to be perfect. One slip, one inconsistency, and Adrian would have gutted us both. Past tense, baby. Would have. Because right now, our dear departed king is scattered across 200 miles of ocean. The study door was open just enough that Adrian could see movement through the crack. Vivian in a red dress he'd bought her for their anniversary. Marcus in his shirt sleeves, his service weapon still holstered at his hip out of pure habit. They were toasting. They were fucking toasting over his corpse. Adrian's vision tunneled. His free hand had moved back to his gun without conscious thought, his finger already sliding along the trigger guard. 2 shots. Maybe 3. He could end this right now, right here, and damn the consequences. Elena's hand slid down to cover his, stopping him. "Not yet," she whispered. "You shoot them now. You die anyway. You don't know how deep this goes." He wanted to shake her off. He wanted to storm up those stairs and watch their faces when they realized their celebration was premature. But her words cut through the rage like ice water. How deep this goes. "The accounts," Vivian was saying now. "Tell me you got the accounts." "Every single one." Marcus sounded drunk on triumph. Cayman, Switzerland, Panama, even the ones he thought nobody knew about. "I've had access to his passwords for 2 years, Viv. 2 years of watching and waiting and copying every keystroke. As of 3 hours ago, every dollar that was Adrian Viscari's is now in holding under our shell corporations." "How much?" 140 million, give or take. Plus the real estate holdings, the business interests, the political connections. It's all ours now. Well, ours and our partners. Partners. Adrian's stomach dropped. "Speaking of," Vivian said, "when do Dimitri's people arrive?" "Tomorrow night. Shipment comes through the port at midnight, the first shipment under the new arrangement. They'll distribute through our network instead of Adrian's old channels. We cut out the Italians, the Irish, all of Adrian's antiquated alliances. Dimitri gets Chicago as a hub. We get protection and a 30% stake in everything that moves through it." "The Kozlov Bratva." Vivian's laugh was brittle. Adrian would be rolling in his grave if he had one. He spent 15 years keeping the Russians out of his territory. "Yeah, well, Adrian's territory is our territory now. His rules don't mean shit anymore." Elena's hand was shaking against Adrian's. Or maybe he was shaking. It was hard to tell where his rage ended and the rest of the world began. 15 years. Marcus had been at his side for 15 years. Through wars and truces, through expansions and contractions, through the death of Adrian's father and the consolidation of power that followed. They'd bled together, fought together, built an empire together. And Vivian, Christ, Vivian, he'd married her young, brought her into this life, given her everything she'd ever wanted. Yes, the love had died. Yes, they'd become strangers who shared a house. But this wasn't divorce. This wasn't even betrayal in any normal sense. This was execution dressed up as inheritance. "What about the funeral?" Marcus asked. "We still doing the full show?" "Absolutely, day after tomorrow. St. Catherine's, full procession, every family in the city paying respects. We need everyone to see that Adrian Viscari is mourned, honored, and buried. The transition of power has to look legitimate." "You're going to cry beautifully." "I've been practicing." Vivian's voice went soft, mocking. "Oh, my husband, my love, taken too soon. If only I'd told him not to fly in this weather. If only I'd begged him to stay." She laughed. "Meanwhile, Marcus, you're going to give the eulogy." His best friend, destroyed by grief, stepping up to hold things together in Adrian's absence. Very noble, very touching. "Think anyone will buy it?" "Does it matter? By the time the service ends, we'll have Dimitri's backing, Adrian's money, and operational control of every asset he spent 2 decades building. Anyone who questions it will have to go through the Bratva first. And if they do, then they join Adrian at the bottom of the Atlantic." The conversation continued, but Adrian had heard enough. Elena was pulling at him now, gentle but insistent, drawing him back toward the hallway, away from the stairs, away from the voices that were casually dismantling his entire existence. He let her lead him, not because he wanted to. Every cell in his body screamed to go back, to end this, but because she was right. If he moved now, he died. Maybe not immediately, but soon. And if Dmitri Kozlov was involved, if the Bratva had already made deals and distributed his assets, then killing Vivian and Marcus would just make him a target for something much larger than himself. They moved through the dark house like ghosts. Elena knew every corner, every shadow, every board that didn't creak. She led him through the kitchen, down into the wine cellar, and then to a section of wall that looked exactly like every other section until she pressed something and a panel swung inward. A tunnel. There was a fucking tunnel in his house. Prohibition era, Elena whispered, producing a small flashlight from somewhere. The original owner was a bootlegger. Your renovations didn't touch this section because it's not on any official blueprints. How do you know about it? Because I was hired to know about it. Move. We have maybe 20 minutes before Marcus does his security sweep and realizes you're here. Adrian followed her into the narrow passage. The panel closed behind them with a soft click, sealing them in cool darkness broken only by Elena's light. The tunnel smelled of earth and old stone and secrets that had survived almost a century. They walked in silence for what felt like forever, but was probably only 5 minutes. Adrian's mind was racing, cataloging, analyzing. 8 months. Elena had worked for him for 8 months. He'd hired her through an agency, hadn't he? Or had Marcus recommended her? Christ, he couldn't remember. She'd been so unremarkable, so perfectly designed to fade into the background that he'd never questioned her presence, which meant she was either the best actor he'd ever encountered, or, "Who do you work for?" he asked. Elena didn't answer. She just kept walking, her light bouncing off walls that gradually shifted from rough stone to something more finished. They were going up now, a gentle incline that suggested they were leaving his property entirely. Elena. Not Elena. She glanced back at him, and in the flashlight's glow her face looked different, harder. That's not my real name, but you can keep using it if it makes this easier. What makes this easier is you telling me what the fuck is going on. What's going on is that you just died. Officially, completely, and very publicly. Your jet is at the bottom of the Atlantic. Your wife is a widow. Your best friend is your grieving successor. And every person who mattered in your world believes you're gone. Except you. Except me. Why? She stopped walking. They were at another door now, metal and modern, completely incongruous with the old tunnel. Elena punched in a code, and it clicked open. Because I was supposed to make sure you got on that jet. The admission hit him like a physical blow. I was supposed to confirm your departure, verify you were on board, send the signal to detonate the charges. That was my job. That was why I was placed in your house 8 months ago. She pushed the door open. Beyond it was a garage he didn't recognize, containing a nondescript sedan. But I didn't do it. Why not? Elena turned to face him fully. In the better light, he could see her clearly for the first time. Not a mousy housemaid, but a woman probably in her late 20s, athletic, with eyes that had seen too much to be as innocent as she'd pretended. Because 3 days ago, I found out who really killed my father, she said. And it wasn't you. Chante. The safe house was 40 minutes outside the city, a forgettable ranch in a forgettable suburb that could have been anywhere in America. Elena drove in total silence, checking mirrors with the practiced ease of someone who'd run this route before. Adrian sat in the passenger seat, gun in his lap, watching her with the kind of focus that had kept him alive through 2 decades in a business that ate men whole. She'd saved his life. She'd also been sent to end it. Those 2 facts were at war in his head, neither winning, both demanding answers he didn't have. The house was dark when they pulled into the driveway. Elena killed the engine and sat for a moment, hands on the wheel, staring at nothing. Your father, Adrian said finally. Who was he? Carlo Valente. The name detonated in Adrian's memory like a shaped charge. Carlo Valente, Italian, connected. Ran a decent chunk of the North Side distribution network until 5 years ago, when he'd been found in his car, 3 bullets in his head, his hands cut off and left on his own doorstep as a message. Adrian had been questioned by the police. They'd looked at him hard for it. Everyone knew he and Carlo had been territorial competitors, that their crews had clashed over dock access and supply chains. But there'd been no evidence, no witnesses, nothing that stuck. Because Adrian hadn't done it. He'd wanted to, had planned it a dozen different ways, but someone else had moved first, and by the time Adrian figured out the angles, Carlo was already dead and the territory had fractured into pieces small enough that Adrian could absorb them without anyone screaming about it too loud. You think I killed your father? Thought, Elena corrected. Past tense. Everyone thought it. The police, our family, the other crews, everyone knew it was you. You had motive, opportunity, and you're the one who ended up with his territory. But I didn't do it. No. She looked at him now. Marcus did. The world tilted sideways. What? Marcus killed my father on Vivian's orders. They were already planning your death 5 years ago, but they needed to consolidate power first, eliminate competition, create the infrastructure to take over when you fell. My father was a problem. Too loyal to old alliances, too connected to the families that would have questioned a sudden transfer of authority to your wife and best friend. So they removed him, made it look like your work, and let you take the blame while they absorbed his network piece by piece. Adrian's grip tightened on the gun. You have proof of this. I have recordings, financial transfers, emails between Vivian and Dmitry Kozlov going back 4 years. Before my father died, before they had any official reason to be in contact. They've been planning this longer than either of us has been alive, Adrian. Your death isn't the beginning. It's the end game. She opened her door, climbed out. Adrian followed her into the house, his mind still reeling. The interior was sparse but functional. Surveillance equipment on one wall, a laptop on a folding table, files stacked in careful piles. This wasn't a panic room. This was a command center. Elena went straight to the laptop and woke it up. I've been investigating my father's murder for 5 years. I worked my way into positions close to everyone who might have been involved. I spent 2 years as a secretary in Dimitri's Chicago office, 6 months as a bartender in a club Marcus frequented, and then I found an opening in your household staff, and I took it because everything pointed to you as the killer. She pulled up files, video clips, audio recordings. But the longer I watched you, the less it made sense. You're methodical, careful. If you'd killed my father, it would have been clean, professional, untraceable. His murder was brutal, public, designed to send a message. That's not how you operate. So you dug deeper. So I dug deeper, and I found these. She clicked play on an audio file. Vivian's voice emerged from the speakers, younger but recognizable. Can't keep waiting for Adrian to make mistakes, Dmitry. He doesn't make them. We need to create the conditions ourselves. Dmitry Kozlov's accent was thick, but his English was perfect. You are talking about killing a king, Mrs. Vescari. Kings do not die easily. They do if the knife comes from someone they trust. Your husband trusts Marcus? With his life. Then perhaps Marcus should hold that life in his hands a little while longer, 5 years maybe. Long enough to make the transfer of power look natural when it happens. The recording ended. Elena pulled up another one, this time video, grainy security footage from what looked like a parking garage. Marcus, younger, leaner, walking with purpose toward Carlo Valente's car. A brief conversation, Carlo turning away. Marcus drawing his weapon. 3 shots. Elena closed the laptop. I found this 6 days ago. I was going to expose them, go to the families, show them what Marcus and Vivian had done, but then I realized that would just get me killed. So I decided to save you instead. Why? Because you're the only person with the power to actually stop them, and because... She hesitated, something vulnerable crossing her face for just a moment. Because my father always said you were a bastard, but you were an honest bastard. You played by rules, even if they weren't the law's rules. Marcus and Vivian, they don't have rules. They'll burn this entire city if it means they get to rule the ashes. Adrian set his gun on the table. His hands were steady, but his thoughts were anything but. I'm dead. Officially. How do I stop them when I don't exist? You do what they think you can't do. You come back from the dead. Elena pulled a burner phone from a drawer and handed it to him. But not yet. Not until we have leverage. Right now, they have your money, your territory, your connections, everything. If you surface now, they'll activate every asset they've stolen from you and bury you properly this time. So what do you suggest? I suggest we do what they did. We plan. We watch. We gather the pieces they think they've already won. She met his eyes. Your funeral is in 2 days. Vivian will cry. Marcus will eulogize. Dmitry will probably attend to pay his respects to his new partners. And while they're all congratulating themselves on the perfect murder, we're going to be building the case that destroys them. Adrian studied her, this woman who'd served him coffee, cleaned his floors, existed in his peripheral vision for 8 months while carrying the weight of her father's murder and a revenge plan that had just pivoted 90 degrees. You could have let me die, he said. Easier for you. Simpler. Easier isn't always right. We're criminals, Elena. Right and wrong aren't really in our vocabulary. Maybe not. She smiled, thin and sharp. But revenge is. And I think we both have plenty of that to go around. They spent the rest of the night going through Elena's evidence. It was damning, detailed, and absolutely useless in any legal sense. Recordings obtained illegally, financial documents stolen from private servers, surveillance gathered without warrants. But Adrian didn't need legal evidence. He needed ammunition. And Christ, Elena had given him an arsenal. The scope of the betrayal was staggering. Marcus hadn't just stolen money, he'd systematically compromised every operation Adrian ran. Shipments were redirected, bribes were paid to Adrian's enemies. Witnesses who might have testified in Adrian's favor during various investigations had mysteriously recanted or disappeared. And Vivian had been the architect, using her position as the untouchable socialite wife to move through circles Adrian couldn't access, making deals and promises in his name without his knowledge. "The port deal," Adrian said, pulling up a file. "The one they mentioned, Dimitri's shipment coming tomorrow night. What is it?" "Fentanyl precursors, enough to produce about 40 million in street value once it's processed and cut. It's the first major delivery under the new arrangement. Once that shipment clears and gets distributed through what used to be your network, the Bratva will have a permanent foothold in Chicago. After that, Marcus and Vivian become untouchable. Anyone who comes for them comes for Dimitri too." "And the port?" "Your port. Or it was. Vivian transferred operational control to a shell company 3 months ago. You signed the paperwork yourself." Adrian remembered. It had been buried in a stack of routine documents, explained as a tax optimization strategy. He'd trusted Marcus to vet it. Stupid. Trusting anyone had been stupid. Elena was watching him. "You're planning something." "The shipment," Adrian said. "If it doesn't arrive, if Dimitri's people show up tomorrow night and find an empty dock, what happens?" "The deal collapses. Dimitri loses 40 million in product and looks weak in front of his people. Marcus and Vivian lose their protection and their credibility. Everyone who was willing to accept the transition of power will start asking questions." "Can we intercept it?" "Maybe. I have the shipping manifest, the dock location, the timing. But Adrian, if we steal that shipment, we're not just fighting Marcus and Vivian anymore. We're fighting the Bratva. That's war." "Yeah." Adrian smiled for the first time since walking into his house that night. It wasn't a pleasant smile. "Good. I'm tired of being dead. Let's remind people why they were scared of me when I was alive." Elena stared at him, and something shifted in her expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. "You're serious. You wanted revenge for your father. I'm offering you a chance to watch the people who killed him burn." He stood, pacing now, the pieces clicking together. "We hit the shipment. We make it look like a rival crew, the Irish maybe, or one of the South Side gangs. Dimitri will go after them, which creates chaos. In that chaos, we start leaking evidence. Not everything, just enough to make Marcus and Vivian look incompetent, sloppy, unworthy of the empire they just stole. And then? Then I make my entrance at the funeral. Alive, angry, and backed by enough evidence to prove they tried to kill me." He looked at her. "You said you have recordings of Vivian and Dimitri planning my death. Can you edit them into something I can broadcast?" "Yes, but... And the financial records, the transfers from my accounts to their shells. Can you trace them publicly?" "Adrian, if you expose this at your own funeral, it'll be a bloodbath. Literally. Marcus will have security. Dimitri might bring his people. You'll be outnumbered and outgunned." "Then we make sure we're not." He pulled out the burner phone, started scrolling through contacts he'd memorized years ago. People who weren't in any official system, who didn't exist on paper but who owed him favors or feared him enough to answer when he called. "I've spent 20 years building relationships. Some of them might think I'm dead, but a few will take my call anyway. The Irish hate the Russians. The South Side crews hate Marcus. And there are at least 3 families who never liked Vivian's social climbing bullshit." Elena was watching him with something like awe. "You're going to start a war to cover your resurrection." "I'm going to use an existing war to announce I never died." He looked up at her. "You in?" She didn't answer right away. Her father was dead because of this world, because of men like Adrian and Marcus and Dimitri who built empires on violence and called it business. She could walk away right now, take the evidence, disappear, start over somewhere far from Chicago and its blood-stained streets. But she didn't move toward the door. She moved toward the laptop. "I'm in," she said. "But we do this smart. We plan every move, every contingency. These people killed my father because he underestimated them. I won't make the same mistake." Agreed. "And after?" Elena's eyes were hard. "After we destroy them? After you take back your empire? What happens to me?" It was a fair question. She'd saved him, yes, but she was also Carlo Valente's daughter. Her father had been Adrian's competitor, his enemy. Traditional rules said she was a liability, someone who knew too much and couldn't be trusted. Traditional rules said he should kill her when this was over. But Adrian was tired of traditional rules. Traditional rules had gotten him killed. "After," he said carefully, "you get to decide. Walk away if you want. I'll set you up. New identity, money, protection. You'll never have to think about this life again. Or you stay. You helped me take it back. You helped me rebuild it into something that doesn't collapse the moment someone I trust decides to betray me." He met her eyes. "You're smart, Elena. Smarter than Marcus ever was. And you've already proven you can think 5 moves ahead. I could use someone like that. Someone who isn't afraid to tell me the truth, even if it's a truth I don't want to hear. You're offering me a position. I'm offering you a partnership. If you want it." Elena laughed, a short, bitter sound. "My father would roll over in his grave. Your father's dead because he trusted the wrong people. Don't make the same mistake." Adrian held out his hand. "So what's it going to be? Partners? Or are we just using each other until this is over?" She looked at his hand for a long moment. Then she reached out and shook it, her grip firm. "Partners," she said, "until they're all dead, or we are." That's the spirit. They worked through the night and into the gray dawn, building a plan that was equal parts audacious and insane. Elena had resources Adrian didn't: surveillance access, digital footprints, the kind of 21st century skills that his generation of criminals had never quite mastered. And Adrian had something she didn't: decades of knowing exactly how men like Marcus thought, what they'd protect, where they'd be vulnerable. By the time the sun came up, they had a strategy. It was risky. It would probably get them both killed. But if it worked, Adrian Viscari was going to do something no one in the history of Chicago's underworld had ever done. He was going to come back from the dead and take back his throne. And anyone who stood in his way was going to learn why you didn't celebrate a king's death until you'd burned the body and scattered the ashes. Because some men don't stay buried. And Adrian Viscari was about to remind the entire city exactly what kind of man he'd always been. The first call Adrian made was to Patrick Sullivan. He waited until exactly 7 in the morning, early enough that the old Irishman would be awake, but late enough that he wouldn't be drunk yet. The phone rang 4 times before a gravel, rough voice answered. "Yeah." "Patrick, it's Adrian." Silence. Then, "Bullshit. Adrian Viscari's plane went down yesterday. Whole city's talking about it." "Whole city's wrong. I need a meeting." More silence. Adrian could hear the wheels turning. Patrick Sullivan hadn't survived 40 years in Chicago's criminal landscape by being stupid. He was calculating odds, measuring risks, trying to figure out if this was a trap or an opportunity. "Where are you?" Patrick asked finally. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere we can talk without anyone knowing I'm still breathing." "If you're really Adrian, tell me something only he would know." Adrian smiled despite everything. 3 years ago, your grandson got picked up on a possession charge in Evanston. Judge was going to throw the book at him, make an example. I made a phone call. Case disappeared. You never asked what it cost me, and I never told you it was a favor I called in from a state senator who owed me for campaign contributions. Your grandson walked because I made sure he walked, and you owed me after that, even though we never spoke about it. Patrick exhaled slowly. Jesus Christ, you really are alive. For now, I need your help, and I'm offering you something in return. I'm listening. The Russians are moving into my territory. Dmitry Kozlov specifically. They have a shipment coming through the port of Chicago tonight. 40 million in precursor chemicals for fentanyl production. It's going to make them the dominant supplier in the entire Midwest. And once they have that locked down, they're going to start squeezing everyone else out, including you. Patrick's voice went cold. How do you know this? Because the people who think they killed me are the ones who made the deal with Dimitri, Marcus, and Vivian. They're handing him my entire operation on a silver platter in exchange for protection and a cut of the profits. Marcus Reeves, your head of security? My former head of security, my former best friend, currently very committed to making sure I stay dead. Patrick cursed, a long stream of Irish profanity that would have impressed sailors. And you want what? Revenge? I want the shipment intercepted. I want Dimitri embarrassed. I want Marcus and Vivian scrambling to explain how they lost $40 million worth of Russian product before the deal was even 24 hours old, and I want it done in a way that makes it look like you did it. So Dimitri comes after you instead of looking for me. You want me to start a war with the Bratva. I want you to finish one that's already starting. Dimitri's been testing your Southside territory for months, Patrick. You know it. I know it. Half the city knows it. He's been waiting for the right moment to make his move, and my death was supposed to be that moment. So yeah, I'm asking you to hit him first, hit him hard, and take what's his before he takes what's yours. And what do I get out of this besides a target on my back? You get the entire shipment, $40 million in product that you can sell, cut, distribute however you want. You get first strike in a war that was coming anyway. And you get me owing you a favor when I take my empire back. When you take it back, that's confident. I didn't survive 20 years by being modest. Patrick laughed, rough and genuine. I always liked that about you, Adrian. You're an arrogant bastard, but at least you're honest about it. The humor faded. This is risky. If Dimitri figures out I'm working with a dead man, he won't. You hit the shipment, you make it look clean, like you had inside information from one of his own people. Happens all the time in our business. And by the time anyone starts asking hard questions, I'll be alive again, and Dimitri will have bigger problems than figuring out who tipped you off. When are you planning this miraculous resurrection? My funeral, day after tomorrow, St. Catherine's. I'm going to walk in while they're eulogizing me and show everyone exactly what happens when you try to bury a king before he's actually dead. Patrick was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, You're either the craziest son of a bitch I've ever met or the smartest. Haven't decided which yet. Can be both. Yeah, I suppose it can. Another pause. I'll hit the shipment. But Adrian, if this goes sideways, if Dimitri figures out you're alive and comes for me because of it, he won't get the chance. I promise you that. Your promises aren't worth much right now, considering you're supposed to be fish food. Then consider it incentive for me to make sure I stay alive. I die for real this time. You lose the favor. I survive. You get a very grateful partner who remembers his friends. Fine. Send me the details. And Adrian, don't make me regret this. Wouldn't dream of it. Adrian ended the call and looked at Elena, who'd been listening to the entire conversation. She raised an eyebrow. You really think Patrick Sullivan is going to risk war with the Bratva based on a phone call? Patrick's been looking for an excuse to hit the Russians for months. I just gave him one that comes with a $40 million payday. He'd be stupid not to take it. And if he fails, if Dimitri's security is better than we think, then we adapt. But Patrick didn't survive this long by being sloppy. He'll get it done. Adrian pulled up another contact. Now we need to make sure that when the shipment disappears, Marcus and Vivian can't just shrug it off and make new deals. We need them exposed, vulnerable, and scrambling. The recordings, Elena said. If we leak them to the right people, not leak, broadcast. I want everyone at that funeral to hear exactly what Vivian and Marcus said about me. I want it played on speakers, shown on screens, impossible to ignore or deny. And I want it timed perfectly so that when I walk through those doors, nobody has any doubt about why I'm still alive or who tried to kill me. Elena moved to her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. I can set that up. There's a production company that does audiovisual for all the major church events in the city. If I can hack their system, I can upload the files to play during the service. Marcus won't know it's coming until it's too late to stop it. How long do you need? 6 hours, maybe. The security isn't great, but I have to be careful not to leave traces. She glanced at him. What are you going to do while I'm working? Adrian picked up his gun, checked the magazine, chambered around. I'm going to pay a visit to someone who can help us make sure my entrance at the funeral is properly dramatic. Who? Someone who knows how to make a dead man look very much alive. The someone was Victor Sobol, a Russian expatriate who'd been doing makeup and prosthetics for Chicago theater companies for 30 years, while also running a very profitable side business, creating fake IDs, altering appearances for people who needed to disappear, and occasionally helping criminals look like someone else entirely. Adrian had used his services twice before. Once to age a witness who needed to testify without being recognized. Once to help a politician's mistress vanish before the scandal broke. Victor's studio was in a converted warehouse in a neighborhood that was trying very hard to gentrify and failing spectacularly. Adrian parked 2 blocks away and walked, hood up, face down, just another anonymous figure in a city full of them. The morning was cold and gray, threatening rain that hadn't quite decided to fall yet. He knocked on the service entrance. 3 quick raps. Pause. 2 more. Victor's code from back when paranoia was justified. Still was, apparently, because a security camera swiveled to focus on him and a voice crackled through an intercom. "We're closed." "It's Adrian Viscari. I need your help." "Adrian Viscari is dead. Heard it on the news." "Heard wrong. Open the door, Victor." A long pause. Then locks clicked and the door swung inward. Victor stood there, 70 years old and rail-thin, wearing a paint-stained apron and holding a cigarette that had burned down to mostly ash. He stared at Adrian like he'd seen a ghost. "Bоже moi," he breathed. "They said you're playing." "Yeah, everyone says that. Turns out I wasn't on it." Adrian stepped inside, and Victor closed the door behind him, throwing multiple locks with the practiced ease of someone who understood exactly how dangerous his client list made him. The studio was chaos organized by some system only Victor understood. Mannequin heads lined the walls, wigs on stands, makeup kits spread across every surface, and in the corner, a full photography setup with lighting and backdrops. Victor led him past all of it to a small office that smelled like coffee and cigarette smoke. "Sit," Victor ordered. "Tell me why a dead man is in my studio and what he wants from me." Adrian sat. "I need to look like myself, but different enough that I can move around the city without being recognized. Not a full disguise, just enough that if someone sees me on the street, they think I'm familiar, but can't place me. And then? And then in 2 days, I need to look exactly like myself again. Clean, polished, ready to walk into my own funeral and make an impression." Victor took a long drag on his cigarette, eyes narrowing. "You're planning something dramatic." "Very. Good. Dramatic I can work with." He stood, stubbed out the cigarette in an overflowing ashtray, and gestured for Adrian to follow him to a makeup chair. "Sit. Let me see what I have to work with." For the next 2 hours, Victor worked with the focused intensity of an artist who took his craft seriously. He studied Adrian's face from every angle, took measurements, made notes in a language Adrian didn't recognize but assumed was Russian. "Your problem," Victor said as he worked, "is that you have a very distinctive face, strong bones, the scar through your eyebrow, the way you carry yourself. People remember you even when they don't mean to. So we soften. We change the details without changing the structure." He applied subtle prosthetics, nothing dramatic, just small additions that altered the shape of Adrian's nose, the line of his jaw. Colored contacts to change his eyes from dark brown to hazel. A wig that was close to Adrian's natural hair color but cut differently, styled to change the shape of his face. Careful makeup to add years and tiredness, to make him look worn down in ways that the real Adrian Viscari never allowed himself to appear. When Victor finally stepped back, Adrian looked in the mirror and barely recognized himself. He looked like a man who'd been through something hard and come out diminished, older, forgettable. "Perfect," Adrian said. "For now, yes. But you said 2 days you want to look like yourself again?" "Exactly like myself. Better, actually. I want to look like a man who's supposed to be dead but very clearly isn't. Healthy, strong, undeniable." Victor smiled, showing yellowed teeth. "That I can do. Come back the morning of your funeral. I'll make you look like a king rising from the grave." "What do I owe you?" "For this? Nothing. For the funeral preparation? We discuss price then." Victor lit another cigarette. "But Adrian, whatever you're planning, be careful. The people who tried to kill you, they won't appreciate you coming back." "I'm counting on it." Adrian left through the same service entrance, now looking enough like a stranger that he could move through the city without fear of recognition. He took public transit back to the safe house, something he hadn't done in years, and found Elena exactly where he'd left her, hunched over her laptop, eyes red from staring at screens, fingers still moving across the keyboard with mechanical precision. "You get it?" he asked. "Got it. The audiovisual system at St. Catherine's is now mine. I can upload files, trigger playback remotely, and they won't know anything's wrong until the recordings start playing during the service." She looked up at him and did a double take. "Jesus. Who are you?" "Victor's handiwork. Think it'll hold up on the street?" "I walked past you this morning and I know what you look like. This? I wouldn't look twice." She closed the laptop. "What's next?" "Next, we make sure Patrick's hit on the shipment goes smoothly. You have the dock location?" Elena pulled up a map on her phone. "Berth 17, Port of Chicago, 11 p.m. tonight. The ship is registered out of Vladivostok, scheduled to dock at 10:30. Unloading starts at 11, and the cargo is supposed to be transferred to 3 trucks that will take it to a distribution warehouse in Cicero. Marcus has 6 men on site for security, plus whatever crew Dmitri sends. Patrick will bring at least twice that. He's not stupid. He knows hitting a Russian shipment means overwhelming force or nothing." Adrian studied the map. "We need to be there." "What?" "No. Adrian, if we're there when Patrick hits the dock, we won't be in the line of fire, but I need to see it happen. I need to know Marcus's security failed, that the plan worked, that Dimitri's shipment is actually gone. Because if something goes wrong, if Patrick gets intercepted or the cargo doesn't arrive or any one of a dozen things falls apart, we need to know immediately so we can adjust." Elena stared at him. "You want to watch your own people get hit by the Irish while you're supposed to be dead? They're not my people anymore. They're traitors working for the woman who tried to kill me and the man who betrayed me. And yeah, I want to watch them fail. Call it closure." She didn't argue further. Maybe she understood the need to see it with his own eyes, or maybe she just recognized that arguing with Adrian when he'd made up his mind was pointless. Either way, she pulled up more detailed schematics of the port. "There's a warehouse complex about 200 yards from berth 17, she said. "Abandoned, scheduled for demolition next month. If we position ourselves on the 3rd floor, we'll have a clear sight line to the dock without being exposed. Then that's where we'll be." They spent the rest of the day preparing, gathering surveillance equipment, plotting escape routes, making sure they had contingencies for everything that could go wrong. Adrian made more calls, reaching out to other contacts who thought he was dead, dropping carefully worded hints that something big was about to happen and that staying neutral might be wise. Word would spread. It always did in their world. By tomorrow morning, half the city's criminal networks would be buzzing with rumors that Adrian Vescari might not be as dead as everyone thought. It would create confusion, uncertainty, and most importantly, it would make Marcus and Vivian nervous. Nervous people made mistakes. At 9 that night, Adrian and Elena left the safe house in separate cars. Another of Victor's touches was a nondescript sedan that wouldn't attract attention. They drove to the port through different routes, parking in different locations, and converged on the abandoned warehouse from opposite directions. The building was exactly what Elena had promised. 3 stories of rusted metal and broken windows, empty except for pigeons and the ghosts of whatever manufacturing had once happened here. They climbed to the 3rd floor, set up their observation position behind a window that gave them a perfect view of berth 17, and waited. The ship arrived on schedule at 10:30, a mid-sized cargo vessel that looked like 1,000 others in Chicago's port. Longshoremen moved with practiced efficiency, securing lines, preparing for unload. And standing on the dock, conspicuous in their black jackets and obvious weapons, were Marcus's security team. Adrian recognized 3 of them, men he'd hired himself, men who'd worked for him for years. Seeing them now, following Marcus's orders, standing guard over a shipment that would have been Adrian's if his plane had actually gone down, made his jaw tight with fury. "There," Elena whispered, pointing. "Marcus." He stepped out of a black SUV like he owned the dock, which technically he did now since Vivian had transferred the port operations to their shell company. Marcus moved like a man comfortable with power, confident in his security, certain that everything was going according to plan. Adrian had taught him that confidence, had shown him how to read a room, how to project authority, how to make men follow him through force of personality rather than fear. Watching him now felt like looking at a twisted reflection. 2 more vehicles, Elena murmured. Russian plates. Dmitri's people. 4 of them, all built like brick walls, all moving with the kind of discipline that said military training. They conferred with Marcus briefly, then positioned themselves around the dock in a perimeter that was actually quite good. Patrick's going to have to work for this one, Adrian said. You think he can do it? I think he's about to find out. They waited. 11 o'clock came and went. The crane started moving, lifting shipping containers from the vessel's hold. Marcus was on his phone, probably coordinating with Vivian, probably reporting that everything was proceeding smoothly. Then, at 11:13, the lights went out. Not just on the dock, the entire section of the port went dark in an instant. Emergency lighting kicked in after a few seconds, but it was dim, inadequate, and suddenly the confident security perimeter looked a lot less confident. Marcus was shouting orders, his voice carrying across the water. The Russians had drawn weapons, scanning the darkness. And then Patrick's people hit them from 3 directions at once. It wasn't subtle. Patrick had brought at least 20 men, all armed, all moving with the kind of coordinated precision that said they'd done this before. Suppressed gunfire lit up the dock in brief muzzle flashes. Marcus's team tried to return fire, but they were already falling, already outmaneuvered. The Russians put up more of a fight. They moved to defensive positions, returned fire with discipline, managed to drop 2 of Patrick's people before the sheer numbers overwhelmed them. The whole thing took maybe 90 seconds. When it was over, Marcus was on the ground, hands zip-tied behind his back, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead. His entire security team was down. Adrian couldn't tell if they were dead or just incapacitated. The Russians were being held at gunpoint, smart enough not to fight when the fight was already lost. Patrick himself stepped into the emergency lighting, his face hard and satisfied. He said something to Marcus that Adrian couldn't hear, and Marcus spat at him. Patrick just laughed and gestured to his men. They moved with practiced efficiency. The shipping container with Dmitri's chemicals was disconnected from the crane, loaded onto one of Patrick's trucks. The bodies were dragged into another container. The dock was cleaned of shell casings and blood. And within 10 minutes, Patrick's entire crew was gone, vanished into Chicago's industrial sprawl like they'd never been there at all. Marcus struggled to his feet, still zip-tied, and stumbled to his phone. He'd make the call to Vivian soon. Would have to explain how 40 million in product had just disappeared, how the Russians had been humiliated, how the entire foundation of their deal with Dmitri had collapsed before the concrete had even dried. Elena lowered her camera. She'd recorded everything. We should go. Yeah. They left the warehouse the way they'd come, silent and careful. Adrian's mind was already racing ahead to tomorrow, to the funeral, to the moment when he'd walk through those doors and watch Marcus and Vivian's faces when they realized their perfect murder had one critical flaw. The victim had survived. Back at the safe house, they watched the recording 3 more times. It was perfect, clear evidence that Marcus's security had failed catastrophically, that the shipment was gone, that Patrick Sullivan now had leverage over both the Viscari Empire and the Bratva. Dmitri's going to be furious, Elena said. Good. Furious people make mistakes too. Adrian pulled up his phone. And speaking of furious, I have one more call to make. Who? Someone who knew my father. Someone who remembers when this empire actually meant something. He dialed a number he hadn't called in 5 years. It rang 4 times before a woman's voice answered, sharp and alert despite the late hour. Who is this? Mrs. Castellano, it's Adrian Viscari. I need to talk to your husband. A sharp intake of breath. Adrian's dead. I went to the vigil. The vigil was premature. I'm very much alive and I need to speak with Joseph. More silence. Then, hold on. Shuffling sounds. A man's voice in the background, sleep rough and confused. Then Joseph Castellano came on the line, and his voice was like gravel through a cement mixer. This some kind of sick joke? No joke, Joseph. It's me, and I need your help at my funeral. Christ, Adrian, what the hell is going on? What's going on is that Marcus Reeves and my wife tried to kill me, think they succeeded, and are currently celebrating my death, while handing my empire to the Russians. What's going on is that I'm about to crash my own funeral and take back everything they stole. And what's going on is that I need men I can trust standing behind me when I do it, because this is going to get messy. Joseph was quiet for a long moment. He'd been one of Adrian's father's most loyal people, had helped Adrian consolidate power after the old man died, had been pushed aside over the years as Adrian brought in newer, younger talent like Marcus. Adrian had thought it was progress. Now it looked like stupidity. "You're really alive," Joseph said finally. "Really alive and really pissed off. So here's what I'm asking. Bring 10 of your best people to St. Catherine's day after tomorrow. Position them around the church before the service starts. When I walk in, I need to know that if Marcus's people try something, I've got backup that won't hesitate. You're asking me to risk war with whoever Marcus has aligned himself with. I'm asking you to help me take back what's mine and remind the city why the Viscari name used to mean something more than just money and fear. I'm asking you to do what my father would have expected you to do, stand with his son when it matters." That hit home. Adrian could hear it in the silence, in the way Joseph's breathing changed. "Your father was a good man," Joseph said quietly. "You were always too much like your mother, calculating, cold, but he'd want you alive more than he'd want you perfect." Yeah, I'll be there. 10 men positioned around the church. But Adrian, this goes sideways. You're on your own." "Understood. Thank you, Joseph." "Don't thank me yet. Save it for after you're still breathing." Adrian ended the call and looked at Elena. She'd been watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "What?" he asked. "Nothing. Just, you're good at this. Making people believe in you even when everything says they shouldn't. It's not about belief, it's about leverage and respect. Joseph respected my father, which means he respects the legacy. Patrick wants Russian blood and profit. Victor wants to be paid. Everyone has a reason, Elena. You just have to know what it is and how to use it." "And what's my reason?" The question caught him off guard. He studied her, this woman who'd saved his life, who'd chosen revenge against his killers over revenge against him, who'd pivoted her entire life plan in the space of a single night. "Your reason is that you want the people who killed your father to pay," Adrian said. "And you're smart enough to know that working with me is the best way to make that happen." "That's all?" "That's enough, isn't it?" Elena smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Yeah, I guess it is." She turned back to her laptop, and Adrian let the moment pass. They had one day left before the funeral, one day to make sure every piece was in position, every contingency was covered, every possible failure point was reinforced. One day before Adrian Viscari stopped being dead and became something much more dangerous, a ghost with a grudge and an empire to reclaim. The call came at 6 a.m, jarring Adrian from the first real sleep he'd had in 2 days. Elena was already awake, hunched over her laptop with coffee going cold beside her. She glanced at him as he grabbed the burner phone. Patrick's voice came through rough and satisfied. "It's done. Clean as we could make it. Products secured, bodies are handled, and the Russians are going to spend the next week trying to figure out what the hell happened." Marcus? "Left him alive like you said, figured he'd be more useful to you breathing." Patrick paused. "He made a call after we left. To your wife. Sounded like she wasn't happy." "I bet she wasn't. There's something else. Dmitri sent people to the dock about 20 minutes after we cleared out. They found Marcus still zip-tied, looking like he'd been through a war. The Russians weren't gentle with him." Adrian smiled despite himself. "Good. You know this means Dmitri's going to come looking for answers. He's going to tear apart everyone connected to that shipment until he finds someone to blame. Let him. The angrier he gets, the less time he has to think clearly. By the time he figures out what really happened, I'll already be back and he'll have bigger problems than a missing shipment." Patrick was quiet for a moment. "You're playing a dangerous game, Adrian. Only game worth playing. You got what you needed? 40 million in product and the satisfaction of watching Russians bleed. Yeah, I'd say I got what I needed." Patrick's tone shifted. "But Adrian, after today we're square. Whatever debt I owed you, this clears it. Next time we meet, we're just 2 men running territories that happen to border each other. Understood?" "Understood. Stay smart, Patrick." "You too. And Adrian, don't get killed for real this time. Would hate to think I risked my neck for nothing." The line went dead. Adrian set the phone down and found Elena watching him with those sharp, calculating eyes. "Patrick's nervous," she said. "Patrick's smart. He knows that what we just did is going to have consequences that ripple for months." Adrian stood, stretched, felt his back crack. But he also knows that sometimes you have to break things to rebuild them properly. How's the upload? Done? The files are in the church's system. Time to play exactly 15 minutes into the service. That should be right after Marcus finishes his eulogy, but before they start the final prayers. Maximum impact, maximum audience. And if someone checks the system before then? They won't. The files are hidden in the regular service programming. Looks like just another hymn in the queue. Nobody's going to dig that deep for a funeral. She closed the laptop. What about you? You ready for Victor's final touches? Adrian looked at himself in the mirror across the room. Victor's temporary disguise had held up well, but underneath it, he could still see himself. The real Adrian Viscari, buried under prosthetics and makeup, and the fiction that he was dead. Time to bring that man back. Let's go, he said. I have a resurrection to prepare for. Victor's studio looked different in the gray morning light, less chaotic, more purposeful. The old Russian was waiting for them, already set up with his chair and lights and an array of tools that looked more like surgical instruments than makeup supplies. Ah, the dead man returns, Victor said, gesturing to the chair. Sit. We have work to do. For the next 3 hours, Victor worked with the focused intensity of a sculptor revealing something hidden in marble. He removed the temporary prosthetics carefully, cleaned Adrian's skin, studied his face like he was memorizing every line and shadow. Then he began building something new. Not a disguise this time. The opposite. Victor enhanced what was already there, sharpened the angles of Adrian's face, darkened his eyes with subtle contouring that made them look deeper and more dangerous, touched up the scar through his eyebrow to make it more prominent instead of less. He trimmed Adrian's hair with precise cuts that made him look younger, sharper, more like the man who'd built an empire through force of will. You want to look like a king, Victor murmured as he worked. So we make you look like one. Strong jawline, clear eyes, the face of a man who does not beg and does not break. This is not about beauty, Adrian. This is about power. When he finally stepped back, Adrian looked in the mirror and barely recognized himself. Not because he looked different, but because he looked more like himself than he had in years. Vivian had been pushing him toward respectability for so long. Expensive suits, careful grooming, the appearance of a legitimate businessman rather than what he actually was. Victor had stripped all that away and left something rawer, more honest. Perfect, Adrian said. Not quite. Victor produced a suit bag from a closet. You cannot walk into your funeral looking like you slept in a warehouse. Put this on. The suit was Italian, charcoal gray with subtle pinstripes, cut to fit Adrian's frame exactly. He had no idea how Victor had gotten his measurements, but the old Russian had always been thorough. With it came a crisp white shirt, a dark tie, and shoes polished to a mirror shine. Adrian dressed while Victor fussed with final details. A touch more product in the hair, an adjustment to the tie, making sure everything sat exactly right. When he was finished, he looked like a man who'd walked out of his own grave with dignity and tact. Now you are ready, Victor said. Now you look like someone worth killing and worth fearing. What do I owe you? Victor waved a hand dismissively. We discuss payment after you survive. If you die today, I send bill to your widow. Seems fair, yes? Adrian laughed, surprised by the genuine humor in it. Fair enough. Elena was waiting outside in the car, and when Adrian climbed in, she did a double take so pronounced it was almost comical. Jesus, she breathed, you look like a dead man? Like a king. She shook her head. Marcus is going to lose his mind when he sees you. That's the idea. They drove toward St. Catherine's in silence. The church was in the heart of downtown, a massive Gothic structure that had hosted weddings and funerals for Chicago's elite for over a century. Adrian's father had been eulogized there. Now Adrian was supposed to be. The irony wasn't lost on him. They parked 3 blocks away, close enough to walk, but far enough that the car wouldn't be immediately connected to Adrian if things went wrong. Elena had changed into a simple black dress that let her blend with the mourners. Adrian kept his suit jacket buttoned to hide the gun at his hip. Joseph's people should already be in position, Elena said, checking her phone. He texted 20 minutes ago. 10 men, scattered throughout the church, all armed and all waiting for your signal. And Patrick? Sent 3 of his own just to watch. They won't intervene unless things get really ugly, but he wants eyes on what happens. Smart. Adrian checked his watch. 11:45. The service started at noon. You have the trigger for the recordings? Elena held up a small remote, no bigger than a car key fob. One button. Press it, and the files start playing through every speaker in that church. Nobody will be able to stop it once it starts. Then let's make an entrance. They walked the 3 blocks through downtown Chicago like any other couple attending a funeral. The morning had turned cold and gray, threatening rain that matched the occasion perfectly. As they approached street, Catherine's Adrian could see the crowds gathering, black suits and dark dresses, somber faces, and enough expensive cars lining the street to fund a small country. His funeral had drawn everyone, the families, the politicians, the legitimate businessmen who'd never admit they had connections to Adrian Viscari, but who'd benefited from those connections for years. And scattered throughout, the real power, the men and women who ran Chicago's criminal enterprises, who'd come to pay respects to a king and size up whoever thought they could fill his throne. Adrian spotted Joseph Castellano near the church steps, looking older than he had 5 years ago, but still solid, still dangerous. Their eyes met for just a moment, and Joseph gave the smallest nod. His people were ready. Vivian was holding court near the entrance, playing the grieving widow to perfection. She wore black Valentino, her hair pulled back in a simple chignon, her makeup just slightly smudged like she'd been crying. She accepted condolences with quiet dignity, thanking people for coming, saying all the right things about loss and memory and moving forward. Adrian wanted to put a bullet in her right there. Instead, he and Elena slipped into the church through a side entrance, the one used by staff and choir members. Nobody questioned them. In the chaos of a major funeral, 2 well-dressed people who looked like they belonged were invisible. The interior of St. Catherine's was exactly as Adrian remembered. Soaring ceilings, stained glass that turned sunlight into color, and row after row of pews that could seat over 1,000. The front of the church was dominated by an elaborate flower arrangement surrounding a large photograph of Adrian. Official, dignified, the face of a man who'd never existed except in carefully managed public relations. His casket sat closed in front of the altar. Empty, obviously, since his body was supposedly at the bottom of the Atlantic. But it made for good theater. Adrian and Elena found positions in the back corner, partially hidden by a stone column. From here they could see everything. The main entrance, the altar, the balcony where Marcus would give the eulogy, and the faces of everyone who'd come to mourn a man they thought was dead. People began filing in at 11:55. The church filled quickly, a sea of black fabric and hushed voices. Adrian recognized most of them, associates, rivals, politicians he'd bought, judges he'd influenced, businessmen who'd laundered his money through legitimate ventures. His entire world gathered in one place. Vivian entered last, walking slowly down the center aisle with Marcus at her side. She kept one hand on his arm like she needed support, and he played the role of devoted friend perfectly, solemn, protective, grieving. Adrian's hands clenched into fists. Elena touched his arm lightly. "Not yet," she whispered. "Wait for the recording. Let them bury themselves first." She was right. He knew she was right. But watching them play their parts, seeing the sympathy on people's faces, hearing the whispered condolences, it took everything he had not to step out from behind the column and end this right now. The service began at noon exactly. A priest Adrian had never met stood at the altar and began speaking about loss and legacy and the unpredictability of life. He'd clearly been given talking points because he mentioned Adrian's charity work, his business acumen, his dedication to family, all the sanitized fiction that made a criminal empire sound like respectability. Then Marcus stood to give the eulogy. He walked to the pulpit with his head down, like the weight of grief was physically crushing him. When he looked up at the assembled crowd, his eyes were red. He'd either been crying or he was a better actor than Adrian had given him credit for. "Adrian Viscari was my brother," Marcus began, his voice rough with emotion. "Not by blood, but by choice. By the bonds we forged through 15 years of friendship and loyalty and trust." Adrian's jaw tightened. Elena's hand found his, squeezed hard. "I met Adrian when I was nobody," Marcus continued. "A kid from the South Side with more anger than sense, looking for purpose in all the wrong places. He saw something in me that nobody else did. He gave me a chance, taught me everything I know about loyalty, about strength, about what it means to lead. The crowd was rapt. Some people were openly crying now. Vivian dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Adrian built something in this city that will last long after we're all gone, Marcus said. An empire, yes, but more than that, a legacy of taking care of our own, of protecting what matters, of never backing down from a fight. He paused, letting the moment breathe. Adrian could see the calculation in it, the way Marcus was working the room, building towards something. But empires don't run themselves, Marcus continued, and Adrian knew that. In our last conversation, just hours before he boarded that plane, he told me something I'll never forget. He said, "Marcus, if anything ever happens to me, I know you'll do what needs to be done. I know you'll keep this family together." A lie. They'd never had that conversation because Adrian had left his office without seeing Marcus, driven home by instinct that had saved his life. "So that's what I'm going to do," and Marcus said, his voice strengthening. "I'm going to honor my brother's memory by protecting everything he built, by making sure his empire doesn't crumble, by being the man he believed I could be." Vivian was nodding, tears streaming down her face. Several people in the crowd murmured agreement. This was it. The moment Marcus was positioning himself as the natural successor, the grieving friend stepping up to preserve Adrian's legacy. Adrian looked at Elena. She had the remote in her hand, finger on the button. "Now," he whispered. She pressed it. For a moment, nothing happened. Marcus continued speaking, building toward his conclusion. Then the church's sound system crackled, cutting him off mid-sentence. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. And then Vivian's voice filled the church, clear and unmistakable. "To the Atlantic, may it keep its secrets." The recording was perfect. Elena had edited it to flow like a conversation, jumping between the most damning moments with just enough context that everyone could follow along. Vivian toasting Adrian's death, Marcus describing how he'd sabotaged the plane, both of them discussing the stolen money, the Russian deal, the systematic betrayal that had led to this moment. The church erupted. People were on their feet, shouting questions, demanding answers. Vivian had gone white, her hand pressed to her mouth in shock. Marcus stood frozen at the pulpit, his eulogy forgotten, his face cycling through confusion and panic, and finally settling on rage. The recording kept playing. Dmitri's name came up. The shipment. The plan to hand over Adrian's empire to the Bratva in exchange for protection and profit. And then, perfectly timed, the recording ended with Vivian's voice saying, "Anyone who questions it will have to go through the Bratva first. And if they do, then they join Adrian at the bottom of the Atlantic." Silence crashed over the church like a wave. Marcus found his voice first. "This is fake. Someone's trying to sabotage." "It's real," Adrian said, stepping out from behind the column. Every head in the church turned. The silence deepened, became something physical, suffocating. Adrian walked slowly down the side aisle, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. People stared at him like he was a hallucination, a ghost, something that couldn't possibly be real. Vivian made a sound like all the air had been punched out of her lungs. Marcus's hand moved toward his jacket, toward the gun Adrian knew he carried. But Joseph Castellano was faster. He stood from his pew 3 rows back, his own weapon drawn, and pointed at Marcus with steady hands. "I wouldn't," Joseph said calmly. Around the church, 9 more of Joseph's men stood in unison, all armed, all focused on Marcus and the handful of security people he'd brought with him. The math was simple and brutal. Adrian reached the front of the church and stopped in front of his own casket. He put one hand on it, feeling the polished wood under his palm. "Premature," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the space. "The reports of my death, as they say, were greatly exaggerated." Vivian was shaking. "Adrian, I can explain." "Can you?" "Because I'd love to hear how you explained celebrating my death while plotting with Russians to steal my empire. I'd love to hear how Marcus explains sabotaging my plane. I'd love to hear any explanation that makes this something other than what it obviously is." He turned to face the crowd. Hundreds of faces stared back at him, shocked, afraid, calculating what this meant for them. "For those of you who don't know the whole story," Adrian said, "let me fill in the gaps. My wife and my best friend have spent the last 5 years planning my murder. They succeeded in destroying my plane, stealing my money, and convincing everyone I was dead. What they didn't succeed in was actually killing me, because I wasn't on that plane. He gestured to the recording equipment that was still broadcasting silence. Everything you just heard is real. Vivian and Marcus, working with Dmitry Kozlov and the Bratva, conspiring to take over my territory and distribute it to the Russians. They would have succeeded too if they'd been a little more careful about who they talked to and where they talked. Marcus finally found his voice. You're insane. That recording is fabricated. Someone's trying to frame us. Is the shipment fabricated? Adrian asked. The one that was supposed to arrive last night at berth 17? 40 million in fentanyl precursors that the Bratva was going to use to lock down Chicago distribution? The shipment that got intercepted by the Irish before it even cleared the dock? Marcus's face went from red to pale. That information shouldn't have been public yet. Dimitri's people had contained it, kept it quiet while they figured out what had happened. But Adrian had sources Dmitri didn't know about. And now everyone in the church knew that Marcus's first major play as Adrian's successor had failed catastrophically. The shipment was stolen, Adrian continued, walking slowly toward Marcus now. Your security failed. Your deal with Dmitri is falling apart before it even started. And the only reason you're still breathing is because I wanted you alive for this moment. He stopped at the base of the pulpit, looking up at Marcus. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to step down from that pulpit. You're going to admit what you did. And you're going to face what comes next with whatever dignity you have left. Or what? Marcus's voice was shaking but defiant. You'll kill me in front of everyone? In a church? That'll really help your reputation, Adrian. I don't need to kill you. You've already destroyed yourself. Adrian pulled a folder from inside his jacket and tossed it onto the altar. Financial records. Every account you and Vivian stole from me. Every wire transfer. Every shell company you created. It's all there. Time-stamped and verified. And copies have already been sent to the FBI, the IRS, and about a dozen journalists who would love to know how the grieving widow and best friend made off with $140 million. Vivian made a choking sound. You're bluffing. Am I? Check your phone, Vivian. I'm sure you're getting calls right now from very concerned people who want to know why federal agents are asking about your offshore accounts. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands. Her face went gray as she read the screen. Adrian didn't know for sure that the FBI was already moving, but Elena had sent the evidence to enough contacts that someone was probably asking questions. Close enough to truth. This is over, Adrian said, addressing the church again. Marcus and Vivian tried to take what was mine. They failed. Justice will be handled appropriately. By who? Someone called from the crowd. By you? You're a criminal, Viscari. You don't get to play judge. Adrian smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. No, I don't. But I don't have to. Marcus and Vivian made deals with Dmitry Kozlov. They stole his shipment, or lost it, depending on how generous you're feeling. They've humiliated him in front of his organization, so I think Dmitry's going to handle justice just fine on his own. That landed like a bomb. Everyone knew what it meant when the Bratva felt disrespected. Everyone knew that Marcus and Vivian had just gone from predators to prey. Marcus was backing away now, his hand finally closing on his gun. You think you've won. You think this is over. Adrian, you're still a dead man. He never finished the sentence. Joseph Castellano fired once, the shot echoing through the church like thunder. Marcus's gun clattered to the floor. He grabbed his shoulder, blood already seeping between his fingers, and dropped to his knees. That's for threatening a man in a house of worship, Joseph said calmly. Next time I won't aim for the shoulder. Chaos erupted. People were shouting, running for exits, pulling out phones. Vivian tried to bolt, but two of Joseph's men caught her before she made it 5 steps. She struggled, screaming Adrian's name, screaming that this wasn't fair, that he couldn't do this. Adrian walked past her without a glance and stood over Marcus, who was clutching his wounded shoulder and glaring up with pure hatred. You were my brother, Marcus spat. I gave you 15 years. You gave me nothing, Adrian said quietly. You took. You lied. You betrayed. And now you're going to spend whatever time you have left knowing that you failed. That I'm still here, still standing, and you're nothing. He turned away, leaving Marcus bleeding on the floor of the church. Vivian was still screaming. The crowd was in full panic now, people flooding toward the exits. And through it all, Elena stood near the side door, calm and collected, waiting for him. Adrian made his way to her through the chaos. Behind him, he could hear sirens approaching. Someone had called the police, which meant they needed to leave before this turned into a situation neither of them could talk their way out of. "We should go," Elena said. "Yeah, we should." They slipped out the side door and into an alley that would take them back to the car. Behind them, street. Catherine's was in full pandemonium. Police arriving, people still flooding out, and somewhere in all of it, Marcus and Vivian learning what it felt like when the world you thought you controlled turned on you completely. Adrian didn't look back. He'd made his point. He'd shown the city that he was alive, that betraying him had consequences, that his empire was still his, and anyone who thought otherwise had just learned a very expensive lesson. Now came the hard part, rebuilding from the ashes and making sure it never happened again. They made it 2 blocks before Adrian's phone rang. Not the burner, his actual phone, the one that had been sitting dead in a drawer at the safe house for 2 days. Elena had charged it that morning, loaded it with a fresh SIM card, and handed it to him with a simple observation. People needed to be able to reach a man who'd just come back from the dead. He answered without checking the caller ID. "Yeah?" "Adrian Vescari." The voice was accented, Russian, and familiar in the worst possible way. "I was told you died." "Imagine my surprise to hear otherwise." "Dmitry Kozlov." Adrian stopped walking. Elena's hand went to the small of her back where she'd tucked a compact pistol under her dress. The alley suddenly felt smaller, more exposed. "Dmitry," Adrian said calmly, "I'd say it's good to hear from you, but we both know I'd be lying." "Yes, we would both be lying about many things. For instance, I might lie and say I am happy you survived. You might lie and say you had nothing to do with my missing shipment." Dmitry's voice was smooth, conversational, the tone of a man discussing the weather rather than 40 million in stolen product. "But I think perhaps we should speak truthfully instead, don't you?" "Truth sounds good." "The truth is that your wife and your friend made me promises. They offered me Chicago on a silver plate. They said you were dead and that they had everything under control." A pause. "They lied about the first part. I am beginning to think they lied about the second as well." Adrian resumed walking, keeping his voice low. "They lied about all of it. They don't have Chicago under control. They never did. And now that I'm alive again, they have nothing at all. Except my protection. We had an agreement, Adrian. I honored my part. I provided resources, connections, assurances to other organizations that the transition of power would be smooth. And now I find that the people I made this agreement with are liars and thieves who cannot even secure a simple dock delivery. That's between you and them." "Is it?" Dimitri's voice sharpened. "You are alive. My shipment disappears the same night you stop being dead. This seems like more than coincidence." "I didn't touch your shipment, Dimitri. I was too busy making sure I didn't actually die to worry about your business deals." Adrian turned down another alley, Elena matching his pace. "But if you're looking for someone to blame, I'd suggest starting with the people who promised you things they couldn't deliver." "Oh, I intend to. Marcus Reeves and Vivian Vescari will answer for their failures. But first, you and I need to have a conversation about the future." "What future?" "The future where you are alive and ruling Chicago again, and I am a businessman who made significant investments based on promises that are now worthless. We can make this a problem, Adrian, or we can make this an opportunity." They reached the car. Elena had the keys out, was already unlocking the doors. Adrian climbed into the passenger seat and gestured for her to drive. "I'm listening," Adrian said. "You want your empire back. I want compensation for my losses and assurances that Chicago remains profitable for my organization. These goals are not incompatible." Dimitri paused. "Meet with me, tomorrow. Neutral ground. We discuss terms like civilized men instead of starting a war that benefits neither of us." "And if I say no?" "Then I honor my agreement with Marcus and Vivian by eliminating the obstacle to their leadership. Namely, you. I have 12 men in Chicago right now, Adrian. Very good men, very motivated men who are angry about losing $40 million. I would prefer to aim them at the people who actually deserve their anger, but I am flexible." It wasn't really a choice. Dimitri was right. Starting a war with the Bratva while Adrian was still consolidating power would be suicide. Better to meet, to negotiate, to find a way to turn Dimitri from an enemy into something manageable. "Where?" Adrian asked. Do you know the Northside Industrial Complex? Warehouse 12. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. Come alone or come with one person. I don't care. But come armed with proposals, not just weapons. I want solutions, Adrian. Give me those and we both walk away from this richer. The line went dead. Elena was watching him in the rearview mirror, her eyes sharp with concern. That was Dmitry Kozlov. Yeah. He wants a meeting. Tomorrow. Warehouse 12 in the Northside Complex. Adrian rubbed his face, feeling exhaustion settle into his bones. He's not stupid. He knows Marcus and Vivian failed, knows his shipment is gone, knows I'm the only person with enough power to actually stabilize things now. So he wants to negotiate. Or he wants to kill you in person. That too. But I don't think so. Dimitri's a businessman first. If he wanted me dead, he'd send his 12 men to do it quietly, not invite me to a meeting. Adrian looked at her. I need to go. Then I'm coming with you. Elena, don't. Her voice was hard. Don't tell me it's too dangerous or that I should stay behind where it's safe. I've been in this from the beginning. I saved your life, helped you plan all of this. And I'm not sitting on the sidelines now just because some Russian gangster wants to have a conversation. Adrian studied her. 3 days ago, she'd been his invisible housemaid. Now she was arguing with him about meeting with one of the most dangerous men in the Midwest. The transformation was remarkable and more than a little terrifying. You know how to shoot? He asked. My father taught me when I was 12. I'm better than you'd think. Ah, good. Because if this goes wrong tomorrow, we're going to need every advantage we can get. They drove to a different safe house, one Elena had set up weeks ago as a fallback position. It was a condo in a high-rise downtown, registered under a fake name, paid for with cash that couldn't be traced. The kind of place that existed specifically for moments when you needed to disappear into plain sight. The space was sparse, but functional. Elena had stocked it with basics, food, weapons, cash, and a laptop with encrypted connections to every major system she'd need. Adrian went straight to the windows and checked sightlines while Elena powered up the laptop. News is already spreading, she said, pulling up various websites. Social media is going crazy. Someone uploaded video from inside the church. You can see the whole thing. You walking in, the recording playing, Marcus getting shot. It's everywhere. Good. Let them see. Let everyone know what happens when you come for me. FBI is making statements too. They're confirming they received evidence about financial crimes related to your accounts. They're not saying much else, but the implication is clear. Marcus and Vivian are under investigation. Adrian allowed himself a small smile. The law might actually do our work for us. Don't count on it. People like Marcus know how to hide money, and Vivian's smart enough to have exit strategies. Elena looked up from the screen. They're going to run. Let them try. They've got the FBI looking at their finances, Dmitry looking for his lost shipment, and me looking for any excuse to finish what they started. They run, they die tired. His phone rang again. This time it was Joseph Castellano. You made quite an exit, Joseph said without preamble. Church is still crawling with cops. They took Marcus to the hospital under guard. Vivian's in custody. Feds grabbed her before the local cops could. Good. Not entirely. Marcus is talking. Lawyer showed up within 20 minutes, and suddenly Marcus is claiming you framed him, that the recordings were fabricated, that you're the real criminal here. Joseph paused. He's spinning a story, Adrian. And some people might believe it. Some people are idiots. Anyone with half a brain knows I'm not sophisticated enough to fake recordings that detailed while supposedly being dead. Maybe, but perception matters. Marcus is positioning himself as the victim of a vendetta. Says you came back to destroy him because you couldn't handle the fact that he was moving the organization into legitimate territory. Adrian laughed, bitter and sharp. Legitimate. Right. By partnering with the Bratva and distributing fentanyl. I'm just telling you what he's saying, and Vivian's saying similar things, that you were abusive, controlling, that she feared for her life, that the recordings are you twisting innocent conversations into something sinister. Joseph's voice dropped. They're fighting back, Adrian, and they're doing it smart. Doesn't matter, they can spin whatever story they want. The money trail doesn't lie, the dead bodies don't lie, and Dmitry sure as hell won't lie about who he made deals with. Speaking of Dmitry, word is he's looking for you. Already found me. We're meeting tomorrow to discuss terms. Joseph was silent for a moment. That's dangerous. Everything's dangerous right now. But I'd rather negotiate with Dmitri than fight him while I'm still rebuilding. If I can turn him from an enemy into a neutral party, or better yet, a temporary ally against Marcus and Vivian, then the meeting's worth the risk. You want my people there? Hidden, just in case? Adrian considered it. Having backup nearby could be smart, but it could also spook Dmitri, make him think Adrian was planning something violent. No, he said finally. This needs to be clean, but if you don't hear from me by 4 p.m. tomorrow, assume things went wrong and act accordingly. Act how? However you think my father would have wanted you to act. Joseph understood. I'll make the arrangements. And Adrian, be careful. Dmitri Kozlov didn't get where he is by being merciful. Neither did I. After the call ended, Adrian found Elena in the condo's small kitchen, making coffee with mechanical efficiency. She'd changed out of the funeral dress into jeans and a sweater, looking more like herself, or at least more like the version of herself that wasn't playing a role. You should eat something, she said, not looking at him. When's the last time you had a real meal? Adrian tried to remember and couldn't. Yesterday morning, maybe. That's what I thought. She pulled containers from the refrigerator, leftover Chinese food that she must have ordered days ago in preparation. Sit. Eat. You're no good to anyone if you collapse. He sat. She heated the food and set a plate in front of him, then made one for herself. They ate in silence for a few minutes, the normalcy of it almost surreal after everything that had happened. What will you tell Dmitri? Elena asked finally. The truth, mostly. That I'm taking back my territory, that Marcus and Vivian are finished, and that his best option is to work with me instead of against me. And if he wants Chicago for himself? Then we'll have a problem. But I don't think he does. Dmitri's organization is based in New York. Chicago's a secondary market for him. Profitable, yes, but not worth the kind of war it would take to control it completely. He made a deal with Marcus and Vivian because it was convenient and low risk. Now that it's neither convenient nor low risk, he'll want to cut his losses. You're betting a lot on him being reasonable. I'm betting on him being practical. There's a difference. Adrian set down his fork. But you're right that it's a risk, which is why I need you doing something else tomorrow while I'm meeting with Dmitri. Elena's eyes narrowed. What? I need you to find out where Marcus and Vivian are hiding whatever they stole that the FBI hasn't found yet. Cash, documents, leverage they're planning to use. Whatever it is, I want it. And I want it before they can use it to rebuild. Adrian, if I'm not at the meeting with Dmitri, then you're free to work without someone looking over your shoulder. Elena, you're the best hacker I've ever met. You found evidence that destroyed Marcus and Vivian in one night. Imagine what you can do with a full day and access to every system they thought was secure. She wanted to argue. He could see it in her face, in the way her jaw tightened. But she also understood the logic. Splitting up made tactical sense. It gave them two different lines of attack instead of putting all their resources in one place. Fine, she said finally. But if Dmitri kills you, I'm going to be very annoyed. Noted. They spent the rest of the evening planning. Elena pulled up everything she could find on Dmitri's organization. His legitimate businesses, his known associates, his operational patterns. Adrian called more contacts, feeling out who was still loyal, who was waiting to see which way the wind blew, and who had already decided that a resurrected Adrian Viscari was too much chaos to support. The answers were mixed, but not terrible. About half of his old network was willing to work with him again. A quarter was neutral, waiting. And the final quarter had already made deals with Marcus, or decided that Adrian's dramatic return was too unstable to bet on. It would be enough. Barely, but enough. By midnight, Adrian was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. He'd spent 3 days running on adrenaline and rage, and now that the immediate crisis was past, everything was catching up to him. Elena noticed. You should sleep. Tomorrow's going to be intense, and you need to be sharp. Yeah. He looked at her. What about you? I'll work a few more hours, then crash on the couch. Someone should keep monitoring the news and police channels anyway. Make sure there are no surprises. Adrian wanted to argue, to tell her she needed rest too, but he was too tired to make it convincing. Instead, he just nodded and headed for the bedroom. He was asleep within minutes, falling into dark dreams of sinking planes and burning churches, and Vivian's face as she realized he was alive. The sound of his phone ringing jerked him awake 6 hours later. Pale light was filtering through the blinds. Early morning, barely past dawn. Adrian grabbed the phone without checking the caller, his mind already running through possibilities. Dimitri changing the meeting time. Joseph with news about Marcus. The FBI wanting to ask questions. Instead, he heard Vivian's voice. "Adrian?" She sounded wrecked, barely holding together. "Adrian, please, I need to talk to you." He sat up, every muscle suddenly tense. "How did you get this number?" "Does it matter? Please, just listen. I know you hate me. I know what I did was unforgivable, but I need you to understand why. I understand perfectly. You wanted money and power, and you were willing to kill me to get it. That's all the understanding I need. No, it wasn't like that. Adrian, Marcus, he manipulated me. He made me think you were going to leave me, that you'd found someone else, that I'd end up with nothing if I didn't protect myself first." "Stop." Adrian's voice was cold. "Don't insult both of us by pretending this was Marcus's idea. You were in those recordings too, Vivian, celebrating my death, planning how to spend my money. You weren't manipulated. You were a willing participant." She was crying now, genuine sobs that would have moved him once, before he'd heard her laugh about watching him die. "The FBI has frozen everything," she said through the tears. "Every account, every asset. My lawyer says I'm looking at 20 years minimum. Adrian, please. We were married. That has to count for something." "It did count. Right up until you tried to blow me out of the sky. I can help you. I know things about Marcus, about his deals, about where he hid money that even the FBI won't find. I can give you all of it. Just please, talk to the prosecutors, tell them I cooperated, help me get a reduced sentence." "No." "Adrian, you chose your path, Vivian. You chose to betray me, to steal from me, to try to kill me. Now you get to live with the consequences. And if you think I'm going to save you after what you did, then you never understood me at all. Please." He hung up, blocked the number. Then he sat on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing, feeling something cold and final settle in his chest. Vivian had been his wife for 10 years. He'd loved her once, in the way young men love beautiful women who seem to understand them. That love had died slowly over the years, eroded by distance and ambition and the fundamental incompatibility of two people who wanted different things from life. But there'd still been something, respect maybe, shared history, the memory of who they'd been before everything got complicated. Now there was nothing, just anger and betrayal and the knowledge that she'd chosen Marcus over him, chosen money over loyalty, chosen murder over divorce. He'd mourned the marriage he thought he had, but he wouldn't mourn her. Elena appeared in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Heard your phone ring. Everything okay?" Vivian called, wanted me to help her with the FBI. "What did you say?" "No." He took the offered coffee, grateful for the warmth. She made her choices. Now she lives with them. Elena sat beside him on the bed, close enough that their shoulders touched. "For what it's worth, I think you're right. She doesn't deserve your help." "Yeah." Adrian sipped the coffee. It was strong and black, exactly how he needed it. "How long until I meet with Dimitri?" 7 hours. You should eat breakfast, shower, prepare. I've been tracking Marcus. He's still in the hospital, but under federal guard. The FBI is treating him as a flight risk." "Good. Let him sit in that hospital room and think about how badly he fucked up." "There's something else." Elena pulled out her phone, showed him a news article. "One of Marcus's old crew was found dead this morning. Single gunshot to the head, execution style. Police are calling it gang-related, but the timing's suspicious." Adrian read the article, recognized the name. Tommy Vickers. A mid-level enforcer who'd worked for Marcus for years. Loyal, competent, and now very dead. "Dimitri," Adrian said, sending a message. "That's what I thought too. He's cleaning house, eliminating anyone connected to the failed deal, which means Marcus and Vivian are living on borrowed time, and Dimitri's making sure everyone knows it." Adrian set down the phone. "Good. Let the Bratva do our work for us. By the time I sit down with Dimitri this afternoon, He'll have already proven he's serious about consequences. They spent the morning going through contingencies. Elena would stay in the condo, monitoring Marcus and Vivian's digital footprints, looking for hidden accounts or safety deposits or any leverage they might try to use. Adrian would go to the meeting with Dmitri armed with proposals and enough firepower to defend himself if negotiations went sideways. At 2 p.m., Adrian got ready. He dressed carefully. Not the funeral suit, but something simpler, a dark button-down and jeans that said he was taking this seriously but not trying to intimidate. He checked his weapons. The Glock at his hip, a backup piece at his ankle, and a knife in his boot that had saved his life twice before. Elena watched him prepare with those calculating eyes. "You know this could be a trap," she said. "Could be. Probably isn't, but could be. And you're going anyway." "I'm going because I have to. If I refuse to meet with Dmitri, I look weak. If I look weak, everyone who's waiting to see if I can actually hold my empire together will decide I can't." He holstered the Glock, checked that it sat comfortably. "This is about more than just Dmitri. This is about showing the entire city that I'm not afraid, that I'm in control, and that anyone who wants to do business in Chicago goes through me." Elena stood, moved closer. "Then you better make sure you come back alive. Because if you die in that warehouse, everything we've built falls apart." "I don't plan on dying. Plans change." She was right, of course. Plans changed all the time in their world. The best you could do was prepare for the most likely scenarios and hope you were fast enough to adapt when reality diverged from expectation. Adrian reached out and touched her shoulder, a gesture of reassurance that felt more intimate than he'd intended. "If something happens to me, the empire's yours. All the contacts, all the accounts I've recovered, all the leverage I've built, it's in a document on the laptop. Password is your father's birthday." Elena's eyes widened. "Adrian, I'm serious. You've earned it. And honestly, you'd probably run it better than I did anyway. You're smarter, more careful, and you don't have my habit of trusting the wrong people." He managed a smile. "Consider it insurance." She looked like she wanted to argue, but instead she just nodded. "Don't make me use it." "I'll do my best." He left the condo at 2:30, giving himself enough time to arrive exactly on time, not early, which would look desperate, and not late, which would be disrespectful. The Northside Industrial Complex was a sprawling collection of warehouses that had been built in the 60s and slowly decayed into partial abandonment. Some were still operational, but most sat empty, waiting for developers who never came. Warehouse 12 was in the center of the complex, isolated enough that you couldn't approach without being seen. Adrian parked 200 yards away and walked the rest of the distance, his hands visible, his movement slow and non-threatening. 3 men were waiting outside the warehouse. Dimitri's people, all armed, all watching Adrian with the kind of professional assessment that said they'd done this before. The one in the center gestured for Adrian to stop. "Arms up!" Adrian complied. They patted him down, found the Glock, and the backup piece, removed both. The knife in his boot went unnoticed, which was sloppy of them, but Adrian wasn't complaining. "Inside," the man said, jerking his head toward the warehouse door. Adrian walked in and found himself in a space that had been cleaned up just enough to host a meeting. The floor was swept, the lighting was functional, and in the center of the room sat a simple folding table with 2 chairs. Dmitri Kozlov sat in one of them. He was younger than Adrian had expected, maybe 45, with salt and pepper hair cut military short and eyes that looked like they'd seen things that would break most men. He wore an expensive suit that fit perfectly, and when he smiled at Adrian, it didn't reach his eyes. "Adrian Viscari, the man who refuses to die. Please, sit." Adrian sat. The 2 men studied each other across the table like chess players evaluating an opening position. "You're prompt," Dmitri said. "I appreciate that. You asked for a meeting. Seemed rude to be late." "Yes, rude." Dmitri poured 2 glasses of vodka from a bottle on the table, slid one toward Adrian. "Let us drink to your resurrection. Truly remarkable." Adrian took the glass but didn't drink yet. "Let's talk about why I'm here first." "Direct." "I like that." Dmitri leaned back in his chair. "Very well. I invested $40 million in product, plus additional resources in security and logistics, based on promises made by Marcus Reeves and Vivian Viscari. Those promises included your death, their control of Chicago's distribution network, and a profitable partnership that would benefit my organization for years to come. And instead, you got a stolen shipment and two people who are currently more liability than asset. Precisely. Dimitri's smile vanished. This is unacceptable, Adrian. I do not make investments that fail. I do not accept embarrassment, and I do not allow people to cost me $40 million without consequences. I understand. So what do you want from me? I want compensation. I want assurances. And I want to know that if I allow you to continue ruling Chicago, it will be profitable for both of us. Adrian had expected this. Here's what I can offer. First, Marcus and Vivian are finished. The FBI has them on financial crimes, you have them on breach of contract, and I have them on attempted murder. Between the three of us, they won't see daylight for decades. Consider that revenge served. Revenge is satisfying but not profitable. Second, I'll give you the Irish. Patrick Sullivan has your $40 million in product. He also has ambitions that conflict with both our interests. I can arrange a meeting, give you intelligence on his operations, and make sure that when you move against him, you do it with overwhelming advantage. You get your product back, eliminate a rival, and send a message that stealing from the Bratva has consequences. Dimitri's eyes gleamed with interest. Continue. Third, I'll open 2 distribution channels in Chicago that you can access directly. Not a partnership like what Marcus offered. Those always fall apart. But guaranteed access, fair prices, and a mutual understanding that we don't interfere with each other's operations. You get Chicago as a hub without having to fight for it. I get stability and a powerful ally who won't try to take over the moment I'm distracted. And in exchange, you stay out of my territorial disputes. You don't back Marcus or Vivian or anyone else who tries to challenge me. You treat my empire as sovereign territory, and I'll treat yours the same way. Dimitri was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming on the table. Adrian could see him calculating, weighing options, measuring what was being offered against what he'd lost. The Irish, Dimitri said finally. You would give me Patrick Sullivan? With enough intelligence to make sure you don't lose people in the process. Patrick's good, but he's not good enough to stand against the Bratva with advanced warning. You hit him hard and fast, you get your product back, and Chicago sees that crossing Dmitry Kozlov is a terminal mistake. And you trust me not to turn that same strategy against you? I trust that you're smart enough to know that stable partnerships are more profitable than constant warfare. I trust that you value reliability over chaos. And I trust that you've learned from dealing with Marcus that promises from people who betray their own are worthless. Adrian met his eyes. I'm not Marcus, Dmitry. I don't make deals I can't keep, and I don't lie about what I can deliver. Dmitry picked up his vodka glass, studied it like it contained answers. Then he drank it in one smooth motion and smiled. You are either very brave or very foolish, Adrian Vescari. Perhaps both. He set down the glass. I accept your proposal, with modifications. I'm listening. I want 3 distribution channels, not 2. I want monthly meetings to ensure our arrangement remains mutually beneficial. And I want to guarantee that if someone in your organization causes problems for mine, you handle it personally and immediately. Agreed. But I want the same guarantee in return. Your people cause problems in my territory, you handle it. Fair. Dmitry extended his hand across the table. Then we have a deal. Adrian shook it. The Russian's grip was firm, his hand calloused in a way that said he'd started his career doing violence personally before graduating to ordering others to do it. One more thing, Dmitry said, not releasing Adrian's hand yet. Marcus and Vivian. The FBI may have them, but I want to make an example. When they are convicted, when they go to prison, I have people there. People who will make sure their time is very uncomfortable and very short. You have no objection to this? Adrian thought about Vivian's phone call, her desperate plea for help. He thought about Marcus bleeding on the church floor, still trying to spin lies even when everything was falling apart. No objection, he said. Dmitry released his hand. Good. Then we understand each other. You rule Chicago, I have access, and anyone who tries to come between us learns why that was a mistake. They stood. The meeting was over. Adrian had walked into a potential execution and walked out with a treaty. Not a perfect one. Dmitry would test the boundaries, would push for more access and more control, and Adrian would have to enforce his territory carefully. But it was better than war, Much better. As Adrian turned to leave, Dmitri called after him. Adrian, one piece of advice. Yeah? Trust is expensive. Be careful who you purchase it from. Dmitri smiled. Marcus and Vivian taught you this lesson. Do not forget it. I won't. Adrian collected his weapons from the guards outside and walked back to his car. His phone buzzed as he started the engine. A text from Elena. Found something. Big. Get back here now. He drove back to the condo, pushing every speed limit, his mind already racing through possibilities. When he burst through the door, Elena was at her laptop, her face pale but triumphant. What did you find? Adrian demanded. She turned the screen toward him. Marcus and Vivian's insurance policy. A storage unit registered under a fake name, paid for 5 years in advance. I tracked it through a shell company that Vivian used for other hidden assets. What's in it? Everything. Physical files, hard drives, cash, jewelry, anything they needed to disappear and start over if things went wrong. But more importantly, it has evidence. Records of deals Marcus made that you never knew about. Communications with people who were supposed to be your allies, but were actually working with him, and... She paused. And a list. What kind of list? Every person in your organization who Marcus compromised. Names, dates, what he paid them or threatened them with. Adrian, this list has at least 30 people on it. 30 people in your empire who were working for Marcus instead of you. The betrayal cut deeper than Adrian had expected. 30 people. Not just Marcus and Vivian, but an entire network of traitors embedded in his organization, undermining him for years. Where's this storage unit? He asked quietly. Elena gave him an address on the far south side. I've already verified it's still active. The last access was 3 days ago. Probably Vivian, grabbing cash before everything fell apart. Adrian looked at the screen, at the implications of what Elena had found. This wasn't just evidence. This was a purge waiting to happen. We're going to clean house, he said. For every name on that list, every person who chose Marcus over me, they're done. Not violently, not publicly, but they're gone from my organization by the end of the week. That's a lot of people to replace. Then we replace them with people who understand that loyalty isn't optional. He looked at her. Starting with you. Elena blinked. What? You've proven yourself a dozen times over. You're smart, capable, and you haven't tried to kill me yet, which puts you ahead of most people I've trusted. Adrian managed a tired smile. I need someone I can rely on. Someone who tells me the truth even when it's hard to hear. Someone who's earned the right to stand beside me instead of behind me. That's you, Elena. If you want it. She stared at him for a long moment. Then she closed the laptop and stood. I want it, she said, but not like this. Not as your second in command or your assistant or whatever sanitized title you're thinking of. If I'm doing this, if I'm all in, then I'm a partner. Equal voice, equal stake, equal respect. Done. I'm serious, Adrian. No more invisible Maid bullshit. No more being tolerated because I'm useful. I helped you take back your empire. Now I want half of it. He should have hesitated. Should have thought about the implications. About what his organization would say. About whether splitting power was smart or suicidal. But he didn't hesitate. Okay, Adrian said. Half. Partners. You and me rebuilding this thing together. Elena smiled, and for the first time since he'd met her, it looked completely genuine. Then let's go get our insurance policy, she said, and start fixing everything Marcus broke. They drove to the storage unit together, partners in an empire built on violence and betrayal and the stubborn refusal to stay dead when the world wanted you buried. And for the first time in days, Adrian felt something that might have been hope. The storage facility was in a neighborhood that had seen better days. Chain-link fences, flickering security lights, and the kind of emptiness that came when businesses moved out and nothing moved in to replace them. Adrian parked under a broken streetlight while Elena checked the unit number against her notes. Building C, Unit 47, she said. Second floor. They climbed rusted stairs that creaked under their weight, past rows of identical orange doors until they found the right one. Elena pulled out a set of lockpicks that she'd apparently been carrying this whole time, and within 30 seconds, the lock clicked open. The unit was about 10 by 10, packed floor to ceiling with plastic storage bins and metal filing cabinets. Adrian pulled the door shut behind them and switched on the overhead light. Dust motes danced in the harsh fluorescent glow. Start with the hard drives, Adrian said. I want to know exactly what they were planning to do with all this. Elena opened the first bin and pulled out 3 external drives, each labeled with dates going back 5 years. She plugged one into her laptop and started scanning files while Adrian went through the physical documents. It was worse than he'd thought. Marcus hadn't just been stealing money. He'd been systematically documenting every illegal operation Adrian ran, creating a paper trail that could be used either as leverage or as evidence if things went wrong. There were photographs of meetings with corrupt officials, recordings of conversations about shipments and distributions, financial records that connected Adrian to a dozen different criminal enterprises. This is a prosecution kit, Adrian said quietly. Marcus was building a case against me. Or insurance, Elena replied, not looking up from the screen. If you ever turned on him, he could hand this to the FBI and walk away clean while you went to prison for the rest of your life. Adrian found another bin filled with cash, hundreds of thousands in bundled bills, probably skimmed from operations over the years. Another contained jewelry that he recognized from Vivian's collection, pieces worth enough that she could have sold them and lived comfortably anywhere in the world. They'd been planning their exit for years, not just killing him, but ensuring they had everything they needed to disappear if the plan failed. Except they hadn't counted on Elena, hadn't counted on Adrian surviving, hadn't counted on any of this. Got the list, Elena said, pulling up a file. Jesus, Adrian, look at this. He moved behind her to see the screen. 32 names, each with detailed notes about how Marcus had compromised them. Some had been bribed, others blackmailed. A few were just opportunists who'd decided Marcus was going to win and had jumped ship early. Adrian recognized every single name. People he'd worked with for years, people he'd trusted with significant operations, people who'd smiled to his face while feeding information to Marcus behind his back. David Chen, Adrian read aloud, head of our port operations. Marcus paid him $200,000 over 3 years to alter shipping manifests and redirect cargo. Sarah Vega, Elena added. Your accountant. She was cooking the books, making it look like operations were less profitable than they actually were so Marcus could skim the difference. The betrayals kept coming, each one a small cut that added up to something fatal. This wasn't just Marcus and Vivian trying to kill him. This was an entire shadow organization operating inside his empire, loyal to someone else, working toward his destruction while he'd been completely blind to it. How did I miss this? Adrian asked, more to himself than Elena. How did I not see 32 people turning against me? Because you trusted Marcus to handle security, and Marcus made sure you only saw what he wanted you to see. Elena closed the laptop. This wasn't your failure, Adrian. This was a very sophisticated operation that took years to build. Most people wouldn't have survived it at all. But I did survive. And now I know exactly who needs to go. They spent the next hour cataloging everything in the unit, the hard drives, the documents, the cash, the jewelry, all of it evidence of Marcus and Vivian's betrayal and insurance policy rolled into one. Elena photographed everything with her phone while Adrian made lists of what needed to be secured, what needed to be destroyed, and what could be used as leverage. When they were finished, they loaded the most important items into the car and left the rest. Adrian would send people to clean it out properly later, but for now, they had what they needed. The drive back to the condo was quiet. Adrian's mind was already working through the logistics of what came next, how to remove 32 people from his organization without causing panic, how to replace them with people he could actually trust, how to rebuild something that had been rotting from the inside for half a decade. We can't fire them all at once, Elena said, reading his thoughts. It'll look like a purge. People will get scared, wonder if they're next. So we do it strategically. The ones who are just opportunists, we move them to positions where they can't do damage and watch them carefully. The ones who are actively working against us, we remove quietly. And the ones who Marcus blackmailed, we give them a choice. Work for us now, or face whatever Marcus was threatening them with. That's more merciful than they deserve. Maybe, but I need this organization functional, not decimated. We can punish people later. Right now, we need stability. Back at the condo, they spent the rest of the evening going through the hard drives in detail. What they found painted a picture of an organization that had been compromised at every level: security, operations, finances, even Adrian's personal staff. Marcus had been thorough, patient, and absolutely ruthless in his 5-year plan. But he'd also been arrogant. He documented everything because he'd been certain he would win, certain that Adrian would die, and that all this evidence would just be leverage he could use to keep people in line. He'd never considered that Adrian might survive and turn it all against him. Around midnight, Adrian's phone rang. Joseph Castellano. "Heard you met with Dimitri and walked out alive," Joseph said. "That's impressive." "We came to an understanding. He gets what he wants, I keep Chicago. Everyone walks away less likely to kill each other." "Good. Because I've got news you're going to want to hear. Marcus escaped federal custody 2 hours ago." Adrian went very still. "How?" "Hospital transfer, supposedly for emergency surgery, but the ambulance never made it to the hospital. They found it abandoned on the south side with 2 dead federal agents inside. Marcus is in the wind. And Vivian? Still in custody. But the FBI is worried Marcus might try to break her out too. They've moved her to a secure facility." Joseph paused. "You think he'll run or come for you?" Adrian thought about the man who'd been his best friend for 15 years. Marcus wasn't a coward, and he wasn't someone who accepted defeat easily. He'd spent 5 years planning Adrian's death, and now that plan had failed spectacularly. He wouldn't run, not yet. "He'll come for me," Adrian said. "He's got nothing left to lose and everything to prove." "Where would you go if you were him?" "I'd go to ground, rebuild resources, wait for an opening." Joseph's voice was grim. "But Marcus is angry. Angry men make mistakes." "Let's hope so. Keep your people alert. If Marcus surfaces, I want to know about it immediately." "Will do." "And Adrian, watch your back. Marcus knows how you think, knows where you'd go, knows all your patterns. He's dangerous specifically because he knows you too well." After the call ended, Elena was already pulling up security footage from around the city, running facial recognition searches, monitoring police channels. If Marcus was out there, she'd find him. "We should move," she said. "This condo was secure when nobody knew about it. But if Marcus is free, he's got resources we don't know about. People who might tell him where we are." "Agreed. But where?" Elena thought for a moment. "The mansion. Your actual house. That's the first place he'll look." Exactly. Which is why he'll expect us to avoid it. And it's the one place we can fortify properly. Security systems you control, exit routes you know, defensible positions. She looked at him. "Besides, you need to take your house back. Reclaim it. Make it clear that Adrian Viscari is home and not hiding from anyone." She was right. Running would make him look weak, would make people question whether he was actually in control or just surviving day to day. Going back to the mansion was a statement. Bold, maybe reckless, but exactly the kind of move that reminded people why they'd feared him in the first place. "Okay," Adrian said. "We go home. But we do it smart. I want Joseph's people positioned around the property. I want every security system active. And I want you armed at all times." "Already am." Elena pulled her jacket aside to show the compact pistol at her hip. "I've been armed since the funeral." They packed what they needed and drove to the Lakeshore Drive mansion in the early hours of the morning. The house looked exactly as Adrian had left it 4 days ago, imposing, expensive, and completely dark. He half expected to find crime scene tape, but apparently, the police had finished their investigation of the attempted assassination and moved on. Inside, everything was eerily normal. The marble floors, the expensive furniture, the art on the walls, all of it exactly where it had been when Adrian had walked in and found his wife celebrating his death. Elena moved through the space like she'd lived there for years, checking rooms, verifying exits, making sure they were actually alone. "Clear," she said finally. "No signs anyone's been here since the funeral." Adrian went to the study where he'd overheard Vivian and Marcus. The glasses they'd used for their toast were still on the desk, fingerprints probably preserved in the alcohol residue. He picked up Vivian's glass and threw it against the wall, watching it shatter into pieces that glittered in the moonlight coming through the windows. It didn't make him feel better, but it was satisfying in a small, petty way. Elena appeared in the doorway. "Joseph's people are in position. We've got 6 men outside, 2 on each approach, all armed and alert. If Marcus tries to come here, we'll know about it long before he gets close." "Good." Adrian moved to the window, looking out at the city lights reflecting off Lake Michigan. "How long do you think before he makes his move?" "Hours, maybe a day. He's desperate, and desperate people don't wait." They were both right. Marcus made his move at 4 in the morning. The alarm system woke them, a soft chime that indicated someone had breached the perimeter fence on the north side of the property. Adrian was on his feet instantly, gun in hand, moving toward the window. Elena was right behind him, already on her phone coordinating with Joseph's people. 2 contacts, she said quietly. North fence, moving toward the house. Joseph's men are intercepting. Gunfire erupted outside. 3 quick shots, then silence. Adrian's phone buzzed. Joseph. Got one of them. The other made it to the house. He's inside. Adrian's blood went cold. Where? Lost him in the security feed. Could be anywhere. The house suddenly felt like a trap. 20,000 square feet of rooms and hallways and hiding places, and somewhere in all of it was Marcus with a gun and nothing left to lose. Stay close to me, Adrian told Elena. We move together, clear each room, don't give him any opening. They started on the 2nd floor, working methodically through bedrooms and bathrooms and sitting rooms that Adrian had barely used. The house was too quiet, every sound amplified, the creak of floorboards, the distant hum of the HVAC system, their own breathing harsh in the darkness. They found Marcus in Adrian's bedroom. He was standing by the window, silhouetted against the city lights, holding a gun loosely in one hand. He didn't turn when they entered, just kept staring out at Chicago like he was memorizing it. Figured you'd come here eventually, Marcus said. His voice was tired, drained of the confidence that had defined him. This was always your favorite room. Best view in the house. Adrian kept his weapon trained on Marcus's back. Drop the gun. Why? So you can have Joseph's people arrest me again, so I can rot in federal custody while you take back everything I spent 5 years building? Marcus laughed, bitter and broken. No thanks. I'd rather end this on my terms. There's no ending this for you, Marcus. You're done. Finished. Even if you kill me right now, Dmitri will hunt you down for screwing up his deal. The FBI will find you for killing their agents, and every person in this city who I've built relationships with will make sure you never have a moment's peace. I know. Marcus finally turned around. His face was haggard, with dark circles under his eyes and a desperation that made him look 10 years older. I know it's over, but I'll be damned if I go out without looking you in the eye and telling you the truth. What truth? That you tried to kill me, that you stole from me, that you betrayed 15 years of friendship for money and power? Adrian's voice was hard. I already know all of that, Marcus. No. The truth is that I hated you. The words came out raw, honest. I hated you for 15 years. Every day, every conversation, every time you trusted me with something important, I hated you. Because you were everything I could never be. Born into this life, confident in your power, never doubting that you deserved to rule. While I was just the Southside kid you gave a chance to, always on the outside looking in, always second best. So you decided to destroy me. I decided to take what should have been mine from the beginning, but Vivian, he laughed again, Vivian was smart. She knew I couldn't do it alone, that I needed someone close to you to make it work. So she seduced me, made me think it was my idea, made me think we were partners. And I was stupid enough to believe her. She played you. We played each other. She wanted your money, I wanted your empire, and we both wanted you dead. It should have worked, Adrian. It should have been perfect. Marcus raised his gun, but not to point at Adrian. He pressed it against his own temple. But you survived. You always survive. That's what makes you Adrian Viscari. That's what I could never match. Marcus, don't. Why not? Give me one reason I shouldn't end this right now. Elena stepped forward, her voice calm. Because you owe my father better than this. Carlo Valente didn't die so you could take the coward's way out. Marcus's eyes widened in recognition. You're Elena, the maid. He looked at Adrian, understanding dawning. She's Carlo's daughter. Jesus Christ, Adrian. You let Carlo Valente's daughter into your house and she saved your life instead of killing you. How does that feel? Better than being betrayed by someone I actually trusted, Adrian said. Marcus was shaking now, the gun still pressed to his head. I wanted to be you so badly that I destroyed myself trying. That's the real joke, isn't it? I had everything, your trust, your resources, your wife. And I threw it all away because I couldn't accept being second. You were never second, Marcus. You were my partner. My friend. If you just talked to me, if you told me you wanted more, you would have given it to me? Marcus shook his head. No, you would have seen weakness and eliminated it. That's what kings do. They don't share power. They don't trust people who want what they have. They destroy threats before threats destroy them. That's not true, isn't it? Look at what you did to me the moment you knew I'd betrayed you. You didn't hesitate. You exposed me, ruined me, and now you're going to watch me die knowing you won. That's exactly what a king does. Adrian wanted to argue, to tell Marcus he was wrong, but part of him knew there was truth in it. He had been ruthless in his response. He had destroyed Marcus completely and efficiently, and yes, there had been satisfaction in it. Maybe that made him a king. Or maybe it just made him a survivor who'd learned not to show mercy to people who tried to kill him. If you pull that trigger, Elena said quietly, you prove Adrian right. You prove that you were never strong enough to rule, that you were always going to break when things got hard. Is that really how you want to be remembered? Marcus looked at her, then at Adrian. The gun was still pressed to his temple, his finger on the trigger. What's the alternative? Federal prison? Dimitri's people finding me? Living every day knowing I failed? He laughed, hollow and desperate. That's worse than dying. Maybe, Adrian said, but it's what you've earned. You made your choices, Marcus. Now you get to live with them. Or die with them. That's up to you. For a long moment, everything hung in balance. Marcus's finger on the trigger, his eyes wild with desperation and hatred, and something that might have been regret. Adrian kept his weapon trained on his former friend, knowing that if Marcus decided to go out fighting, this would end in violence. Then Marcus lowered the gun. I'm too tired, he said. Too tired to fight, too tired to run, too tired to even kill myself properly. He let the weapon fall to the floor. Just get it over with, Adrian. However you want to do this, just do it. Adrian lowered his own gun. Joseph, you can come in now. Joseph Castellano appeared in the doorway with two of his men, all armed. They moved efficiently, securing Marcus's weapon, zip-tying his hands behind his back. Marcus didn't resist, just stood there looking defeated and small. FBI's on their way, Joseph said. They'll take him back into custody. Proper custody this time. Marcus was being led toward the door when he stopped and looked back at Adrian one last time. I hope it was worth it, he said quietly. Everything you did to get here, everyone you destroyed. I hope ruling this empire alone is worth it. He's not alone, Elena said, moving to stand beside Adrian. That was your mistake, Marcus. Thinking power had to be solitary. Thinking trust was weakness. Adrian figured out what you never could, that empires built on betrayal collapse, but ones built on actual partnership last. Marcus looked at her, at Adrian, and something like understanding crossed his face. You're giving her half, aren't you? You're actually going to share power. Yes, Adrian said simply. Then maybe you did learn something from all this. Marcus managed a tired smile. Good luck. You're going to need it. Joseph's people took him away. Through the windows, Adrian could see federal vehicles pulling up, agents moving to take custody of the man who'd spent 5 years trying to kill him. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it just felt like closing a chapter that had left everyone bloodied and broken. Elena touched his arm gently. You okay? No, but I will be. He looked at her. We have a lot of work to do. 32 people to remove from the organization, operations to rebuild, trust to reestablish. It's going to take months, maybe years. Then it's good we're doing it together. They stood at the window watching Marcus being loaded into a federal vehicle, watching the last piece of the betrayal being carted away. The sun was starting to rise over Lake Michigan, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. What happens to Vivian? Elena asked. Federal prison, 20 years minimum if her lawyers are very good, life if they're not. Dimitri's people will make sure her time there is unpleasant. Adrian felt nothing saying it. No satisfaction, no regret, just cold acceptance. She made her choices. And your empire? Our empire now. We rebuild it properly this time. Smaller maybe, more careful definitely, but built on actual loyalty instead of fear and manipulation. He turned to face her fully. I meant what I said, Elena. Partners. Equal say, equal stake, equal risk. I know you did. That's why I said yes. She smiled. Besides, someone needs to make sure you don't trust the wrong people again. Might as well be someone who has every reason to keep you alive. Because if I die, you lose half the empire? Because if you die, I lose a partner who's proven he keeps his word even when it costs him something. She held out her hand. So let's make this official. Elena Valente and Adrian Vescari, ruling Chicago together. Deal? Adrian shook her hand, felt the firmness of her grip, saw the determination in her eyes. This woman had saved his life, helped him reclaim his throne, and proven herself a dozen times over. Trusting her was still a risk. Trust was always a risk, but it was one worth taking. Deal, he said. Over the next 6 weeks, they systematically dismantled everything Marcus had built within Adrian's organization. The 32 compromised people were dealt with quietly. Some transferred to meaningless positions, others removed entirely, a few given the chance to prove their renewed loyalty through actions rather than words. Adrian and Elena worked 18-hour days, meeting with old contacts, establishing new ones, showing everyone in Chicago that the Vescari Empire was under new management, but no less formidable. Dmitri kept his word. He provided intelligence that let Patrick Sullivan be taken down in a coordinated strike that recovered the stolen shipment and eliminated a rival in one efficient operation. The Bratva got their product back. Adrian got proof that his alliance with Dmitri was functional, and the rest of Chicago's criminal networks got a reminder that crossing either of them was a fatal mistake. Marcus pled guilty to multiple federal charges in exchange for protective custody away from Dmitri's reach. He was sentenced to 30 years in a maximum security facility in Colorado, about as far from Chicago as the federal system could place him. Vivian fought the charges for 2 months before her lawyers convinced her that fighting was pointless. She eventually accepted a 25-year sentence in a women's facility in California. Adrian received one letter from her before she was transferred. It was short, bitter, and ended with a single line. I hope ruling your empire alone keeps you warm at night. He burned it without responding. Some conversations weren't worth having. The legitimate businesses that Vivian had been running were absorbed into the empire properly this time, with Elena overseeing the transition to make sure they were actually profitable rather than just fronts for money laundering. She had a talent for seeing systems clearly, for understanding how money moved and where it was vulnerable, and within a month she'd restructured operations to be both more efficient and more secure. Adrian found himself relying on her more than he'd expected, not just for her technical skills, but for her perspective. She asked questions he wouldn't have thought to ask, challenged assumptions he'd taken for granted, and wasn't afraid to tell him when he was being an idiot. It was exactly what he needed, someone who saw him as a partner rather than a boss, who had enough stake in their success to be honest, even when honesty was uncomfortable. 2 months after his resurrection, Adrian stood in the same study where he'd overheard Vivian and Marcus celebrating his death. The room had been completely renovated, new furniture, new carpet, new everything. Elena had insisted on it, said they couldn't build something new while surrounded by reminders of what had been. She was right, as she usually was. Joseph's here, Elena said, appearing in the doorway. Says he has something for you. Joseph Castellano entered carrying a small wooden box. He set it on Adrian's desk and stepped back. What's this? Adrian asked. Your father's ring, the one he gave me before he died, told me to hold on to it until you'd proven you deserved it. Joseph opened the box to reveal a heavy gold signet ring with the Vescari family crest. I think you've proven it. Adrian picked up the ring, felt the weight of it. His father had worn this every day of his adult life, had built the original Vescari Empire with this ring on his finger. Adrian had assumed it was buried with him. Why didn't you tell me you had this? Adrian asked. Because your father made me promise not to give it to you until you'd actually earned the right to wear it. Not by being born into the family, but by proving you could lead it through crisis and come out stronger. Joseph smiled. Surviving your own death and taking back your empire from traitors definitely qualifies. Adrian slipped the ring onto his finger. It fit perfectly. Your father would be proud, Joseph said quietly. Not of everything you've done, he'd have thoughts about some of your methods, but of who you've become, of the fact that you're still standing when most men would have died or broken. Yeah, he'd be proud. After Joseph left, Elena came to stand beside Adrian at the window. The view was the same as it had always been. Lake Michigan stretching to the horizon, Chicago's skyline glittering in the afternoon sun, the vast and complicated city that was now theirs to manage and protect. You thinking about your father? Elena asked. Thinking about legacy, about what it means to inherit something versus earning it. Adrian looked at the ring on his finger. I inherited this empire, but I had to earn the right to keep it. And now? Now we build something that lasts. Not just for us, but for whoever comes after. Something that doesn't eat itself from the inside. He looked at her. Your father, Carlo. What would he think about all this? Elena was quiet for a moment. He'd hate that I'm working with you. Hate that I'm helping run an empire in the same world that got him killed. But, she paused, I think he'd also understand. He always said that survival was about adaptation, about knowing when to hold old grudges and when to forge new alliances. And I think he'd respect that I chose to build something rather than just burn it all down for revenge. You could have burned it all down. You had the evidence, the access, the motivation. Yeah, but that would have been easy. This, she gestured at the city outside. This is harder. This requires actually believing that change is possible, that power can be used for something other than destruction. I'd rather try the hard thing and fail than take the easy way out. Adrian smiled. You know, when you first showed up in my hallway and told me to stay quiet, I thought you were just terrified. I was terrified. But terror and courage aren't opposites. They're partners. Elena met his eyes. You taught me that. You were terrified when you walked into that funeral, but you did it anyway. That's what real power looks like. We should do something with that power, Adrian said. Something that actually helps people instead of just enriching us. Like what? He thought about Carlo Valente, killed for being in the wrong place at the wrong time in a criminal world that devoured good men and bad ones with equal efficiency. He thought about all the people who got caught in the crossfire of empires and ambitions, the witnesses who disappeared, the families who lost everything, the kids who grew up in the shadow of violence and inherited nothing but trauma. A foundation, Adrian said. Anonymous, untraceable, funded by our legitimate businesses. We use it to help families who've been hurt by organized crime, scholarships for kids who lost parents, legal help for witnesses who need protection, rehab for people trying to get out of the life. We can't undo the damage, but maybe we can help clean up some of the mess. Elena stared at him. You're serious? Completely. We're criminals, Elena. Let's not pretend otherwise. But we can be criminals who leave the world slightly less broken than we found it. Your father never did anything like that. My father lived in a different time. And besides, this isn't about him. This is about us deciding what kind of empire we want to run. Adrian held out his hand. So what do you say? Partners in crime and partners in trying to do something decent with the profits? Elena took his hand, but instead of shaking it, she held it, her thumb brushing over his father's ring. Partners, she said, in everything. 3 months later, the Valente Vescari Foundation quietly opened its doors. It operated through layers of shell companies and anonymous donors, completely untraceable to Adrian and Elena, but funded generously enough to make a real difference. The first recipients were families who'd lost loved ones to gang violence, not affiliated with any organization, just civilians who'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time. One of those families was Carlo Valente's widow and her other children. They never knew where the money came from, never knew that Elena had made sure her mother and siblings would be taken care of for the rest of their lives. It was enough. Adrian's empire stabilized under the new partnership. The old guard accepted Elena slowly at first, then with increasing respect as she proved herself again and again. She had a gift for seeing problems before they became crises, for reading people even better than Adrian did, and for making hard decisions without the emotional baggage that had sometimes clouded his judgment. They developed a rhythm. Adrian handled the old-school elements of the organization, the relationships and territory management and personal connections that required his specific brand of intimidation and charm. Elena managed the technical side, the digital operations, the money flows, and the strategic planning that kept everything running smoothly. Together, they were more effective than Adrian had ever been alone. Dmitri honored their agreement, and the partnership evolved into something approaching respect. The distribution channels Adrian had promised became incredibly profitable for both organizations, and within 6 months, Dmitri was actively defending Adrian's territory against encroachment from other Russian factions. It wasn't friendship, but it was functional, and in their world, functional was better than most alliances achieved. Patrick Sullivan's territory was divided between several smaller operators, none strong enough to challenge Adrian's control. The Irish pulled back to their traditional Southside strongholds, and an uneasy peace settled over Chicago's criminal landscape. A year after his resurrection, Adrian stood in the same bedroom where Marcus had held a gun to his own head. The room had been repainted, refurnished, turned into something that didn't carry the weight of that confrontation. Elena had moved into the mansion 6 months earlier, not into his bedroom, but into her own space on the opposite wing. They'd talked about what their partnership meant, whether it was purely professional or something more, and had settled on a truth that worked for both of them. They were partners first, and whatever else developed would develop on its own time. Tonight, she found him at the window again, looking out at the city that had tried to kill him and failed. "Can't sleep?" Elena asked. "Just thinking. It's been a year since I died." "Since you almost died, there's a difference." "Not really. Adrian Vescari, who trusted Marcus and married Vivian, that man died. What came back was something else." Elena moved to stand beside him. "Something better?" "I don't know about better. Different, definitely. More careful. Less willing to assume that people deserve trust just because they've been around a long time. That's called wisdom. Hard-earned, but wisdom nonetheless." She leaned against the window frame. "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Not because you inherited this empire or because you survived betrayal, but because you made the choice to rebuild instead of just burning it all down in revenge. That takes character." Adrian smiled. "You're giving me too much credit. I wanted revenge plenty. Still do sometimes. But you didn't let it consume you. You channeled it into something productive. That's the difference between you and Marcus. He let his hatred destroy him. You used yours to rebuild." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city lights reflect off the lake. Somewhere out there, Marcus was in a federal cell thinking about the empire he'd lost. Vivian was in a different cell, probably still bitter about the life that had been taken from her. And all the people who'd betrayed Adrian were scattered across the country, either in prison or in exile, their names forgotten except as cautionary tales. But Adrian was here. Still standing, still fighting, still building something that might actually last. "I got a call today," Elena said, "from someone interested in buying into one of our legitimate businesses. Tech startup, very promising, wants our venture capital. And I think we should do it. Branch out beyond the traditional operations, start building a portfolio that could eventually transition us into something almost respectable." Adrian laughed. "Respectable? Us? Why not? We're already running a foundation. We've cleaned up most of the violent operations. In 10 years, maybe 20, we could be legitimate business people who just happen to have very interesting pasts." You really think that's possible?" "I think anything's possible if you want it badly enough and you're willing to work for it." Elena looked at him. "Do you want it?" Adrian thought about his father, who'd died in this life, who'd never known anything except power earned through violence and maintained through fear. He thought about Marcus and Vivian, who'd wanted the empire so badly they'd destroyed themselves trying to take it. He thought about all the people who'd crossed his path over 20 years, most of them dead or imprisoned or broken in ways that couldn't be fixed. And he thought about the foundation, about the families they were helping, about the possibility that maybe, just maybe, you could build something in this world that wasn't just about destruction and survival. "Yeah," he said, "I want it. Let's do something nobody expects. Let's actually succeed at going legitimate." Elena smiled, and it transformed her face into something open and hopeful that Adrian had rarely seen in their world. "Then let's get started," she said. "Partners in crime, partners in redemption, partners in whatever comes next." Adrian held out his hand, his father's ring catching the light. "Partners in everything." Elena took his hand, and for the first time since he'd walked into his house and found his wife celebrating his death, Adrian Vescari felt something that might have been peace. The empire had been torn apart and rebuilt. The traitors had been dealt with. The alliances had been forged and tested and proven functional. And standing beside him was someone who'd saved his life. Not because she owed him anything, but because she'd chosen to believe that even in a world built on violence, there was still room for something better. They stood at the window together, two people who'd survived betrayal and chosen partnership, looking out at a city full of problems they'd helped create and solutions they might actually build. It wasn't a perfect ending. Nothing in their world ever was. But it was an honest one, and sometimes honesty was enough. The king who'd died and come back wasn't ruling alone anymore. He had a partner who challenged him, protected him, and believed in a future that might actually be worth building. And in a world where trust was the rarest and most expensive currency, they'd found a way to buy it honestly, not through fear or manipulation or violence, but through mutual respect earned in the hardest way possible. Together, they turned away from the window and toward the work that would fill the next decade of their lives. Building something that would last, creating something that might actually matter, proving that even criminals could choose to leave the world better than they found it. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be clean. It wouldn't erase the blood they'd both spilled or the lives they'd both destroyed in the process of surviving. But it would be theirs, and that was enough.